Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. How's the volume in the back? All right. We went ahead and did make an arrangement to turn it down a little bit. Good morning, everybody. How are my fellow extremists and terrorists this morning? All right, like to hear that. Yeah, you betcha. My name is Mike Fagan. I happen to be a Spokane City Councilman, as well as a co-founder and co-director of Voters Want More Choices. We are the guys that back in 1999 hit the Washington State political scene with Initiative 695, the $30 tab, and we've been working real hard for the taxpayers in Washington State ever since. Now we've got a wonderful lineup of some education, information, etc. coming your way here today, but before we go ahead and get that going, we do have a couple of things that we need to get out of the way. First and foremost, if you all would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Now, before we go ahead and get things started, I want to take a little bit of a personal privilege and read a couple of things to you here, because I think they're very fitting for exactly where we are as a country and what it is, i.e., some of the things that we need to be considering in future election cycles. So, here we go. From bondage to spiritual faith. From spiritual faith to courage. From courage to liberty. From liberty to abundance. From abundance to complacency. From complacency to apathy. From apathy to dependence. From dependence back into bondage. Does that sound like any place that you know of? It sure does, and it's not a very comfortable feeling, is it? Now, with regard to future election cycles, please bear this in mind. This quote came from a 20-year-old pastor by the last name of Garfield, who eventually turned into one of our presidents. And it goes like this. Now more than ever before, the people are responsible for the character of their presidency and their legislatures. If those politicians be ignorant, reckless, and corrupt, it is because the people tolerated ignorance, recklessness, and corruption. If the politicians be intelligent, brave, and pure, it is because the people demand these high qualities to represent them in those offices. History has this uncanny way of rearing its ugly head. And I'm sure that Pastor Garfield, way back in the 1800s there, would not have had occasion to issue that quote unless he was going through, and the nation was going through at that time, some of the same things that we are here today. Wouldn't you agree? All righty. Now, without further ado, we do have our first presentation coming up. This gentleman is from Houston, Texas, and he is with an organization known as True the Vote. Please welcome Mr. Matt Armstrong, and he is going to be talking to us about expectations on the vote.
I think you need to clip this. Oh, you're already wired?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, okay. All right, good deal.
I think so.
All right.
Am I on? Can everybody hear me? Okay. I have to drink my Rockstar, so y'all excuse me. He's going to scan me for NSA wires, so just give me a second.
This is the microphone.
Okay.
Just like tell everybody who's speaking, this is a little microphone here for the camera, so we can have some really nice stuff on YouTube. So in case you want to go walking around, take it with you.
Okay.
Like, you know, like this.
Let's do that.
Okay, great. You look like a walking around kind of guy.
I am. Well, good morning. Thank everybody for having us. I'd like to thank Diane and the organization, everybody that put so much hard work into this event. I know how much effort and time goes into getting something like this set up, so I very much appreciate that. I think they deserve a round of applause from everybody. And my new friends back there who said they might move to Texas someday. I am from Texas, and I believe in liberty. And today I'm going to talk to you about our organization, what we do, and I'm going to talk a lot about pro-liberty and progressive. So if there's any reporters in the room, if you write it the way I say it, then I'll be fine with that. True the Vote is a citizen-led initiative that seeks to empower the grassroots, and our tag phrase is citizen engagement. And we believe that at the heart of our republic, at the heart of an effective governance, that there must be free and fair elections. The consent of the governed relies on the fact that we believe that the people that are elected are the ones that we're supposed to win, regardless of party, but whoever got the most legitimate votes. How many people believe that we live in a society where that is absolutely the case? I was going to say, if anybody was sitting by somebody, knock them on the head for putting their hand up. And so we believe that the heart of citizen engagement, no matter what your political activity may be, whether you're in the Grassroots, Tea Party, 912, Liberty, Patriot groups, civic groups, issue-oriented groups, causes, that it all begins with what we do. And so I'm going to try to make the case to you today that what we do is something that you need to be involved in. Your group should have a couple people involved in this effort. Now, as I said, I'm from Texas, and I am, as you well know, if you've met people from Texas, I am the ultimate loud, proud activist, from Texas. And we're very proud to be from there. I was very inspired last night what I heard. This is my second trip to Washington in the last couple months, and to the great Northwest, as you call it. And I was very inspired by some of the legislators we saw last night. And I'll tell you, Maria, who's my friend from Texas as well, we're going to try to recruit some of those guys and gals to come down. No, I'm just kidding. Now, I want to also talk and mention this afternoon we're doing a workshop, and that will largely be run by our fantastic state leader. And I want to honor, there she is. I want to honor Ruth Ryan, who is our Washington state leader, and I'll talk about our program in a second. And she's got some other volunteers here as well. They spend countless, thousands of hours for no pay to make sure that the integrity of your elections here in Washington are as good as they can be, and she'd be the first to tell you they ain't good enough. But please give a hand for Ruth and the other folks. And as you see here, we are a citizen-led initiative. We are also 10th Amendment friendly. So we are based out of Houston, Texas. I actually live in Frisco, Texas, which is the fastest growing city in the United States. And I always say that for my Frisco friends, but we are 10th Amendment friendly in the sense that we have state-led initiatives that do their thing. We do not tell them what to do. We provide training for poll watchers. We have a research database that people can go through and research the voter rolls to see that people that are on those voter rolls should be on those voter rolls legally and legitimately. And then we also provide help with voter registration and things like that. Let's cover the partisan angle of this first and foremost. We are a nonpartisan organization. We just, last Friday on the 20th, 2 Fridays ago, we were awarded our C3 status from the IRS after 3 years and 3 months. And I'll briefly talk about it. Some of you may have seen our president and founder, Catherine Engelbrecht, on Fox News or all over the media. And I'll tell you real quickly what happened, just so you'll understand the power of the government when they want to go after a group, or in this case, after a private citizen for expressing her First Amendment rights. Catherine was apolitical, as she would tell you, up until about 2008. And then, to sort of check off the box for civic duty, Catherine and a few of her friends decided to go work at the polls and just observe our elections and help out and just, check off the box for civic engagement. What they saw there in Harris County, Texas, which, by the way, is the third largest county in the United States, what they saw there, home of Sheila Jackson Lee, if you've ever seen her on TV, that's where she's from. What they saw there was shocking and disgusting. And so, one of the reasons I admire Catherine, who I've known for a long time, so much, is because they could have just said, well, man, that is bad, but I have a life to live. Her and her husband own a small business, a very successful small business. They actually manufacture parts for the oil field, so they're in the evil oil industry as well. And they decided to start this citizen-led initiative called True the Vote. And I often tell her that she's crazy to do it because I'm not sure I would have done it or any of us would have had the initiative to do that. And they started it from ground zero in Harris County, Texas, trying to make sure that the voter rolls were clean, and they started going observing at the polls. And they were called every name in the book you cannot imagine, the vitriol with which they were treated by the media and the progressive movement. In fact, right after the 2009 election, mysteriously, all $18 million worth of election equipment was burned in a warehouse fire in Houston, Texas. Oddly enough, Catherine was in D.C. at the Restoring, is it Honor or Courage on 9/12, the rally, and the papers were accusing her of starting the fire. So again, those, just like the folks that stood up last night in your legislature, they take a lot of arrows in the back, and they take a lot of arrows in the front. And so people that stand up for liberty deserve, they absolutely deserve, and they need our protection and our support. These are just some of the things that you will see. One of the things that the progressive movement does so effectively is they win the narrative from a communication standpoint. Now, again, the partisan angle. We are a nonpartisan organization. I'll talk to you about what I am personally off the stage, but we represent free and fair elections regardless of party. Catherine is often asked, and says it better than I can, how do you work with the major parties? She says it like this: sometimes the Republican Party works with us, and the Democrat Party likes to sue us. And that kind of is what it is. That being said, I would work with anyone on either side of the aisle if they are truly interested in the integrity of our electional process. It just so happens that the progressive wing is absolutely not for that, and as I will tell you today, I will show you some examples of just what we're up against. These are some of the things that you hear, that you don't hear about enough. And if you see anybody on a talk show on that channel that's got the MS in front of it, they would tell you that you are more likely to be struck by lightning than to see voter fraud. And when they put a Republican on that channel, assuming that they're really Republicans, they don't refute the argument. They don't ever come back and disagree with the premise of the statement or the questions. And so there's this meme going around the United States that voter fraud is something that is a victimless crime and almost never happens. And I'm here to tell you that ain't true. Simply not true. And so these are some of the stats that you'll see. We believe, based on research that we've done, that up to 20% of the registrations in the battleground state of Ohio, which I would argue with you is one of the 3 most important battleground states, and will be again, are problematic. Up to 20% are problematic. Now, when people get engaged with True the Vote, everybody wants to go after the holy grail of voter fraud and nab the bad guys. I do too. But a lot of what happens is not necessarily outright criminal fraud. It's a sloppiness or gaps within the system that allow those that want to perpetrate voter fraud to actually do what they do. And no offense to the great folks here in Washington, having an all-mail ballot system opens itself up for even more of that type of thing. That is the law. That is what you have to work under in the current situation, unless you're ever able to pull it back and to have polling locations again, which I would encourage you to do. But that's the laws that you work under, so you have to do the best you can. And Ruth is going to talk this afternoon in our workshop about exactly what you can do as a citizen activist to try to help ensure integrity of your elections here in Washington. All right. Who knows here what a hydra is? Anyone ever heard of a hydra? Somebody tell me what it is. Yell it out. That's exactly right. A hydra is a mythical creature, which I'm going to show you is not mythical at all. And when you cut off one head, 2 grow back. And when we came up with this presentation, that's the best name that we could come up for it, because the progressive movement, those that are opposed to everything from voter ID, to the folks that want universal voter registration, who want same-day voter registration, who want everyone to be able to vote by mail. Back in the old days, you used to vote on one Tuesday a year, and if you requested an absentee ballot, it was because you had a good reason. You were either going to be out of the country or for some other reason indisposed. And the sad part of it is, our brave military who are overseas serving, the ballots don't always go out in time for them to be able to even cast their vote. And for that, we should all be ashamed. And if you do nothing else or hear nothing else I say today, we should stand up for the right of our troops to have their votes cast. And I will tell you, they do not have a great opportunity to have their votes cast. and have their voices heard, and they're the ones over defending the right for us to even have these things called elections. So the thing that we ask ourselves about the progressive movement is why. And I want you to wrap your head around why they do what they do and why the liberty side, represented here today, doesn't see this as a very important thing. Oops. I'm getting there. Okay. I'm going to talk about they, and they means the progressive movement, okay? And I'm going to go through these slides really quickly, but I'm going to give you an idea of what it's like, what the kind of machine that we are up against, those of us that care about free and fair elections. And I assume by the lack of hands earlier, everybody here is for that. If you notice here, and you might have trouble seeing it, there's an elephant up there, which is the symbol for the Republican Party. That elephant up on the screen has tape on its mouth. Many of you are going to be shocked when I tell you this, and you can go to truethevote.org if you want to verify the veracity of my statements. In 1982, the Republican National Committee signed a consent decree with the Democrat National Committee in Superior Court in New Jersey, signed by a Democrat judge, that the Republican National Committee would not aggressively pursue voter fraud. Now, as bad as that sounds, it's even worse because it is still in effect today. Reince Priebus, out of his mouth, who is the chairman of the Republican National Committee, told Catherine Engelbrecht, our president, last year in the run-up to the election, even if they wanted to help, they couldn't because they were legally had their hands tied. I'm going to go ahead and say it. We're dealing with the stupid party in some cases, okay? But that is still in effect today, and that judge who is retired comes back every year for one day and reauthorizes that consent decree. Okay? Now, who here is shocked by that? Well, I'm going to give you some good news, which is also wrapped around some bad news. I'm going to tell you, folks, and after the end of this, you'll know what I think of the leadership of the RNC, as well as the other one, too. Even if they didn't have this decree, they wouldn't do anything about it anyway. You have to do it. The grassroots, if we're going to save this country, the grassroots is going to have to do all of the heavy lifting because both parties at the top are corrupt and feckless and ineffective. And so even if there wasn't a decree, then it wouldn't matter. There's also a thing called motor voter, which was instituted under the Clinton administration in 1993. And many of the things that we have now arose out of that decree. And right here, who in here has heard of a man named George Soros? I mean, it wouldn't be a pro-liberty conference if we didn't bag on George Soros, right? George Soros, after the 2000 recount, Bush v. Gore in Florida, the left got together, and also after the 2004 election, when Bush won re-election, they got together and they said, you know, we got to do something about these elections because people just don't know any better. And so they formed this thing called the Secretary of State Project. And their goal was to fund a tremendous amount of money to help win Secretary of State races. Now, I will tell you, on the pro-liberty side, folks don't pay too much attention to Secretary of State races. Everybody's worried about the presidency, United States Senate, Congress. There are some folks that have tables back here. I just met one of them last night, so I'm not endorsing anybody. Seemed like a fantastic guy. Your local elections matter more than anything else. That's where a city council can put something on the agenda, pass it, and 6 days later it affects your life. Even the federal government can't act that quickly unless they're trying to barricade the World War II memorial. They are legion. They, again, being the progressive movement. There are more. There's a website if you want to write this down. It's called 866-OUR-VOTE, OURVOTE.org. 866-OUR-VOTE.org. On that website, you will find a tab called Partners. And when you look under Partners, and as I'll show you in a moment, you will see 82 different progressive organizations who are fighting back against election integrity. So in really instances, it's 82 versus 1. It's not a fair fight. David and Goliath. We all know how that turned out. There's also a thing in January of 2013. The progressive groups coming off the 2012 victory sat down and did not rest on their laurels, and they began plotting for what they could do to further what they believe is a progressive majority. And they came up with a thing called the Democracy Initiative. And in that Democracy Initiative, which was published on Mother Jones and other articles, and again, when Diane sends me the list, I'll be able to blast this stuff to you. We have a 6-page white paper that accompanies this Hydra document for all the backup you would need if somebody, if you happen to have progressive friends that want to argue with you about it. This Democracy Initiative came up with 3 main goals for the 2013 year. One of them is to push back or get rid of Citizens United. That's the campaign finance law that the Supreme Court upheld. And you've heard a little bit about that in the media. The other one, second one, is to get rid of the 60 vote filibuster. And you have heard a lot about that, especially in the last 2 or 3 months. The third one deals with what I do. They wanted to push back against all types of common sense voter reforms, including voter ID. My state, the sovereign Republic of Texas, is currently being sued for the second time by Mr. Eric Holder and the Department of Justice over the fact that we legally passed and put into law a voter ID law in our 82nd legislative session, which was 3 years ago. We still do not have adjudication on that, even though our November elections, which we have constitutional amendments on the ballot, and there are some cities that have municipal elections, we will be moving forward with our voter ID law. We believe that the goal is to block it, stop it, obfuscate, stall, so that this law will not be in effect in the 2014 elections, because even they know there is a pro-liberty tsunami coming, much more than we saw in 2010, in my opinion. Litigation. The progressive movement is fantastic at litigation, and the pro-liberty side's not very good. There have been 104, this is actually out of date, there have been 104 election-related lawsuits filed since 2008. 100 of the 104 have been filed by the progressive movement. 4 have been filed on the pro-liberty side. And you're looking at us. Judicial Watch has helped us on several of those. May 21st, we filed suit against the IRS and Lois Lerner and former Chairman Doug Shulman and a host of others, not only to get our C3 status, which they just gave us, but I think they thought if they gave it to us, we would go away. We have 2 other lawsuits that seek damages, and also the main thing is that we will not settle on is we want to go into open court and have open discovery to find out who ordered this targeting of conservative and or Tea Party and or grassroots organizations. Where it came from, who ordered it. I can tell you what I think. I can tell you where I think it came from, but I can't prove it yet. Can't prove it yet. Okay. So in a court of law, we want to get them in open court and have open discovery, and let's find out who did what and why. Lois Lerner, as you know, we filed suit and hand-delivered the lawsuit to her on her front door. She is also personally liable. That's the thing that people don't understand. They do not have just the federal government as a blanket protection. Lois Lerner, Douglas Shulman, and the other people that we named in person are personally liable if they were found to have violated the law. There are some heavy fines and some jail time. Now, I don't expect them to get jail time. Lois Lerner is currently working on an agreement, an amnesty agreement, if you will. She just retired from the IRS. Oddly enough, the exact same day we got our C3 status. I don't know. You tell me if that's connected. Money. Now, I am of a belief, my background is grassroots politics. For the last 2 years prior to coming to True the Vote, I was a co-founding partner of a group called Political Gravity, and we built campaign technology for conservative candidates and causes. So I understand the technology and the data game and the gap that exists between progressive and pro-liberty. It's bad. And I'm also one that doesn't believe you should have to spend a tremendous amount of money to win an election. But you have to have some. You have to have some. And from a financing standpoint, the progressive movement and all of these groups that we call the Hydra are going to spend about $1.69 billion on election-related stuff. Here we are, a fledgling C3 nonprofit with 7 employees and state-led volunteers who don't get paid a dime. And by the way, these ladies and men around the country, they spend their own money for gas, going to Olympia to lobby doing all those kinds of things, and so they deserve even more credit for that. Lobbying. If I could encourage you to do anything today, besides make sure our military get their ballots, it is to get to your legislature. The folks last night who stood up, Matt Shea and the like, they absolutely thanked you for your support, and boy, they need it, and they're going to need it even worse next year than they did this time, or starting in December. The left, let me tell you a little bit about the way it works. In Virginia, they passed a voter ID law in the spring, okay? In the election committee hearings, that's where the citizens have an opportunity to show up and testify in committee. The pro-liberty side hardly goes to the capital of any state capital anywhere to lobby on anything. But when they do, it's usually about some quote-unquote big issue that doesn't relate to elections. The election committee is the stepchild committee in your legislature. Nobody pays much attention to it. Meanwhile, they're passing very onerous laws throughout the country to undermine the integrity of our electoral process, which gets at the heart of all the other committees that you might be going to. Virginia, during the election committee hearings on their voter ID, the progressive movement packed the entire room. Overflow. And they were from every group you can imagine, from the Sierra Club to SEIU to Demos, Progress Now. I mean, I don't even need to go on. The pro-liberty side, about 5 people. This is personal, firsthand from our state leader in Virginia. So it was 100 to 5, which gives the lawmakers an excuse to say, hey, we heard more from one side or the other, so that's the way we voted. Don't give them that opportunity. Email them, fax them, tweet them, Facebook them, make them famous. But you got to show up at the committee hearings and testify to give those that want to do the pro-liberty thing the backbone and the justification to vote the way you want them to. And your side, our side, is not doing that. So during the course of this hearing, a young lady from the Sierra Club stood up and weighed in on the voter ID law and how it was suppressive and it was designed to disenfranchise and all the stuff you hear on that channel that starts with an MS. And one of the committee chairmen said, ma'am, I appreciate you coming today and thank you for your input. I'm just curious, what does the Sierra Club care about elected voter ID? And she, without batting an eye, well-trained, said, I'm here for good legislation. That's what they all said. So if I could encourage you to do anything, not only election-related law, you got to get your fannies down to that Capitol. You have got to go in carpools and vans and buses, and they're going to obfuscate. They're going to stall committee hearings because they know you have to go back and go to work. You got to find a way to get there, and you have got to be educated. You have got to lobby on behalf of the things you want. You've got to provide your legislators who are pro-liberty the backbone and the support they need. I cannot stress that enough. And over the course of the country, it is, again, it's about 100 to 1. Maybe not that bad. It's 20 or 30 to 1. And here, lastly, you might have heard during the State of the Union speech in January that there was a little thing called the Elections Commission that was being formed by the President by executive order. Stop me if you've heard anything started by executive order. Okay? On that commission sits the lead attorney for the OFA and the Obama campaign, Bob Bauer. But also on that committee is the chief lawyer for the Romney campaign, Mr. Ben Ginsberg. And I would tell you, no offense if any of you are related to Ben Ginsberg, but there ain't too much difference between those two. Okay? Who knows what this symbol is right here in the middle? Anybody? That is a symbol for that wonderful free health care, which, by the way, I heard the website is going fantastically well, called Obamacare. During the course, starting October 1st and going forward, though they are hiring thousands, and they have hired thousands of community organizers to be the navigators to go out and get people signed up on this quote-unquote free health care. The law will not stand on itself without a certain number of people signing up, including a lot of young people. They need 4 million young people to sign up just to make it work. During the course of them signing people up for Obamacare, they also legally, under the law, have the right to register people to vote. Nothing wrong with that. The concern that I have, and the concern that you should have, is that those navigators, during the course of signing someone up for a healthcare system, which is really not a healthcare system, would also register someone to vote with a wink wink and a nod nod that says, hey, don't forget, your vote matters. Which way you vote matters. One side wants to get rid of this law, one side is in favor of it, so just think about that when you vote. Now, I'm not sure they'll even be that, tricky about it. They might just come out and flat tell them you need to vote a certain way. That's going on right now, and on the horizon, they are data mining us right now through our taxpayer dollars using the NSA and other federal agencies, no question about it. They are working on a thing called universal voter registration where you have no choice. If you are on the voter rolls, whether you should be there or not, you're going to get registered automatically. I believe that those that want to participate in the Republic have the choice to participate or not. In fact, I'd tell you privately, if I took my True the Vote hat off, I'd like people to either be educated before they vote, but that's something that we're going to have to do. And the last thing is immigration reform. You hadn't heard much about it during the town halls, and I'm not here to talk about that necessarily, though it was purposely done that the Republican lawmakers told their congressmen don't hold town halls and don't talk about immigration. They're working on it as we speak right now. So if you want to lobby them, that's your deal. But they're going to use that to capture this brand new block of 11 to, we don't even know how many, newly legalized citizens and or legalized status folks they believe is a super majority voting block that the progressive movement could get to vote their way. And this is really what says it all about this particular part of the presentation. The progressive movement is not in this to win elections. They're in it to destroy liberty, period. That's what they're in it to do. They're in it to destroy individual liberty, state sovereignty, local control. And you can see it in everything from education to elections. If we allow them to federalize our electoral system, which folks make sure you know that is the goal, a federalized national data registry that will allow the federal government to run the elections from Washington, D.C. That is what's coming if we don't stop it. And we got 2 election cycles to stop it, in my opinion. Now that I've thoroughly depressed you, there is a way to fight back on it. Again, David and Goliath. We're the David. All we need is one pebble. Who's got a slingshot? But we have 35 state-led election integrity groups now, and we are rapidly working on getting that up to 50. And frankly, I love the weather here today, by the way. I came from Texas, and it was 80-some, so I'm enjoying the weather. This morning was a little chilly for me. But I cannot wait until we get our election integrity team in Hawaii, and I've already volunteered to go over and train them for about a week. Last year in 2012, True the Vote trained about 50,000 volunteers personally, okay? And then the scope of that was touched throughout. And there are patriots all over this country who give of their time and energy to go to the polls, or in your case, go observe where they'll let you in Washington observe, signature verification and things like that, who are doing research on the database. And I'll talk about that in a second, to try to make sure that the citizens hold our elections in such an esteem that they are filled with integrity, and right now they are not. The Supreme Court decision that came down this summer, those on the pro-liberty side, okay, I won't tell you what I am, but I'll tell you I go to Hot Air and Drudge, okay, and a few other sites. It was roundly booed as an awful decision. I'd tell you that it's really not. They actually did the right thing. And so Texas is one of the states that's under the Voting Rights Act, Section 5, meaning we had to go through pre-clearance before we could even change our voting districts. Well, they struck that down. So what happened is Department of Justice and Eric Holder, who's really a good friend of True the Vote, by the way, I hope he's watching, they sued us on Section 2 and Section 3, and it's the first lawsuit in the history of the Republic where someone has been sued under Section 3 of the Voting Rights Act. And if they didn't have enough sections, they'd have made one up. Okay? Media, the propagation of media about voting rights is everywhere. And the narrative has been won thus far by the progressive movement that voter ID laws are very restrictive and suppressive. I was in Dallas County 2 weeks ago where there was a public hearing on a vote that they'd already decided on to enter a lawsuit at $275,000 of taxpayer money to enter the lawsuit against our voter ID law because they claim that it would disenfranchise Latino and the black population, up to 220,000 people who don't have an ID. When we pushed back and said the voter IDs are going to be provided for free, they said, well, if somebody doesn't have a birth certificate, then that might cost them $17. Well, guess what? That's free too. There is no excuse. In fact, one of the programs we have started is called Need ID. There's a website you can go to. Right now it's Texas-centric. It's called needid.org, and we are setting up mobile Need ID units to go out wherever, including inner city, in the mountains, wherever we need to help people secure the proper ID, because November 5th, they're going to have their name is going to have to match one of 7 forms of ID, or they will not be allowed to vote. And I will tell you that the progressive movement wants nothing more than a series of horror stories about these poor people, many of which are receiving government assistance, by the way, and you have to have an ID to get that, who cannot vote because of these restrictive voter ID laws. There he is. And there's the lawsuit. Immediately when that came out, we started a thing called Come and Take It. And we actually are pushing back, and we are filing suit and have filed suit against the Department of Justice over our voter ID law as an organization. There it is. Okay? Let me tell you a little bit while I finish up sort of the Hydra part of how brazen, absolutely brazen the progressive movement is, and that they don't think there's enough of you out there to stop them. And thus far, they've been right. This woman right here, her name is Amy Busefink. She was convicted in Nevada in 2008 and 2009 on 13 counts of voter fraud and 2 counts of misdemeanors to pay people to register people to vote. Now, you remember the Acorn organization, correct? And they went away, right? They're gone. No, they are not. They are hydrad. They have now spread. They got more than 2 heads. Anyway, she was the director of Project Vote in Nevada. And you might have heard a thing back during the whole Acorn scandal, of which, by the way, Anita Moncrief is on our staff. She was the former Acorn whistleblower. So we have a keen understanding of what the left does because she worked for Project Vote in Acorn. She was there. She was a community organizer. Then she got in her right mind and came with us. Anyway, this woman served 0 days in jail. 0. Well, now she's in Texas. She's the director of Project Vote in Texas, so we got her. She sent a letter to all of our lawmakers, and we have a huge majority in Texas, 95-55 Republican versus Democrat in the House, God bless you, and 19-12 in the Senate. Now, I said Republican majority. I did not say conservative majority. That's another issue for another day. So she sent a letter which basically threatened our lawmakers. It was as close to a veiled threat as you could get, that you better not push forward on things like voter ID. And it was signed by about 35 left-wing groups, and you could name them: Demos and Project Vote and Acorn and SEIU and NAACP and LULAC and you name it. All right, these are the things that we do. And the things in training is not supposed to be compressed like that. We help people work at the polls. Here, doesn't matter. Ruth's going to talk to you later on about what you can do to do some observation. And they have made pretty good progress here. Many people think, and I coming from Texas, always say, you know what, I've been in Oregon and Washington. I was actually in Utah, Oregon, and Washington this week, and I say, look, Oregon and Washington are really not that far. I mean, they're not this massive progressive. You've got fairly close numbers in the House and Senate. And the people here are like, oh, Matt, you don't live here. You just don't know. I said, well, I do know one thing. If we don't get a handle on this election stuff, it ain't going to swing back the other way, assuming that's what you want. We also we have a research database that's set up specifically for researchers to actually go through the rolls. You can do it, as they often joke, you can sit at home and do it in your underwear. I don't want to know about that. But you can actually sit at your home on your computer and you can research the rolls. And we have a very easy system for you to put challenges out for those addresses that are not legitimate. Now, I understand here from Ruth and others, and same thing in Oregon, if you say you want to register on that patio, you're allowed to say that's your address, which is insane to me. Absolutely insane. And I know that they're working with some of your lawmakers, some of which might have been here last night, to try to work on election-related bills and get them to see the light of day. It's absolutely impossible to have election integrity if someone can say that they live anywhere they want to say and their mail goes to another place. That is insane. But you're not alone. There are other insane states that do that as well. This is kind of where we are right now. We're in the second quarter of this game. 2014 is going to be, we always say this, right, every year. Who say it with me? It's the most important election of our lifetime. Well, it was in 10, it was in 12, it'll be in 14, and until we get out of this mess, which I believe will be a generation. I have an 8-year-old daughter. Her name is Landry, named after Tom Landry. For you Cowboy fans in here. I do this for her because I do not want her to live under tyranny. And at the current rate, not only will I live under tyranny, but she will too. I just can't, I will not, won't have that happen. And if I die in the process, whatever it takes, then that's what I'm going to do. And I believe you all feel the same way about your kids, grandkids. Now's the time to build teams. So if you are interested at all in what we have to say, and you're interested at all in finding a way to get plugged in, I know you're probably in a Tea Party grassroots group, fantastic. I'm in about 5 of them. But every group should have 1 or 2 people that focus on the election integrity piece. And if you did that, not only would you be able to unite the grassroots throughout your state, because I can imagine, like Texas and everywhere else I've been, there are little feuds every now and then between this Tea Party and that Tea Party and this grassroots, and I don't like them. And that's the good thing about the Tea Party movement. Nobody runs it. By the way, I said yesterday as a joke, if anybody ever walks up to you and says, I'm in charge of the Tea Party, you get as far away from that person as possible, because they're going to cause some problems. But if you could unite as a grassroots movement and kind of do your own thing, but you're able to unite, and a couple people in each group focus on election integrity, and likewise a couple focus on illegal immigration, a couple on taxes, a couple on this, a couple on that, you would find that your groups would be more effective. And I'm not telling you what to do. But I do, as in my experience in traveling the country for the last 3 years, I have seen lots of rallies. I'm okay with a good rally every now and then. We need to get our batteries refreshed, but, you know, rallies don't move the ball down the field very much. You got to get and lobby your legislature. You've got to help your lawmakers write bills. You've got to support them when they do the right thing, and you've also got to research the roles. You've got to do something. And so there are many groups that meet every week and they have a nice speaker and they go home and they do nothing. I'm not talking about present company, but if that is your group and you're looking for a quantitative, measurable way to get involved, what we do is something you can do, because you can even quantify the amount of time you spend versus the amount of challenges that you submit versus the amount of people who shouldn't be on the rolls that get removed. So there's a way to make a quantifiable, measurable impact. Here's a poll. I always say that there is much more that unites us than divides us between us or those across the spectrum. Now, the far, far left progressive, there ain't much we agree with them. It's kind of the way it is. But that's it's a much smaller percentage than they would let you believe. It's about 20%. And of that, there may be 15% that are really hardcore progressive. The other 85%, we agree on a lot more than we don't. School choice and getting rid of Common Core, I promise you, if it was on the ballot today, it'd get 75, 80%. Guaranteed. Voter ID, guaranteed would get 80%. In Washington State, it would get 75% if it was on the ballot. So, since we agree on this, and this poll just came out July 25th, not on there, July 25th, McClatchy ain't exactly a right-leaning publication if you're not familiar with them. 83% of those people believe that showing ID to vote at the polls is a good thing. 83%. And the other 17 are progressives. 72% of Democrats see voter ID as a good thing. 65% who say they are very liberal see it as a good thing. I mean, come on. This is a slam dunk issue. I don't know your initiative process, your ballot process. That's y'all's deal. Because I'm going to go back to Texas tomorrow and hopefully watch the Cowboys not give up 50 points to the Broncos. But this is something that would unite you and other folks and cut some of the partisan divide. It cuts across racial lines. It cuts across age lines. This is something that most people agree with. And in fact, I've been an election judge before. And if you haven't been one, I encourage you. It's a great way to serve. People have it out before they even get there. And in Texas, we didn't have a voter ID law, and we still don't really until November. They just think, the average person who's not politically plugged in like we are, they don't know that you don't have to show one. Because they have to show one. I've shown my ID 15 times since I left Texas on Wednesday. And I wasn't even voting. So again, it's an issue that we almost all agree on. So instead of the loudmouth fringe who's against it leading the parade, we should have citizens stand up and let's talk about some common sense. And almost everyone is for this. Here's some things real quickly. Yep, 5 minutes, okay, good. Here's some things that you can do. There's a national registry analytics that we have built into our system. There's also a fantastic project out of Kansas called the Cross-State Voter Projects, put on by Chris Kobach, who some of you've probably seen on TV. He's been involved in helping write the immigration laws in Arizona and in Kansas and whatnot. And your state could participate in it for 0 tax dollars. He's got a data registry where you could compare the number of people that are registered to vote in Washington state and another state. Trust me, there are millions upon millions of people in the United States that are registered in multiple states. Why that is, why we allow that, I don't know. So we also have that. There's the cross-state voter. We also have a project called Am I Registered? One of the true disenfranchisement methods used by the progressive movement is, and I understand it here, that your mail ballots go out X amount of days before they're due in and all that kind of stuff, is somebody actually fills out a mail ballot in your name and votes for you. And then when yours comes in, correct me if I'm wrong, Ruth, first one in counts. That's pretty shocking to me. So I guess what I would tell you is, if you know who you're going to vote for, you best get it in right away. I'd run that thing down there on the first day. But even that, in mail ballot states like Oregon and Washington, people are not sure, even when they drop that ballot off, that it's actually going to count. And I've met countless numbers of people who actually turn one in, and then after the election, when they run the rolls of who did and who didn't vote, they didn't vote, but they did. What we need is documentation and proof, and Ruth is fantastic at that, and I'm sure she'll bring up her 700-page binder later on today when she does a presentation, but she's a documentation queen. And so when there are incidents, things that happen to you, you've got to stand in the gap and actually report them. We have to have affidavits. People have to swear on the record that these things happen in order for them to stop. Then you're going to have to put pressure on your local prosecutors, because that's ultimately in each county, those are the ones that would prosecute voter fraud. It is getting better. I will tell you, this past year there have been more prosecutions for voter fraud than any time in history. In fact, Meloise Richardson, who you may have heard of, she's a young lady in Ohio, not so young lady in Ohio. She's a poll worker and election judge. She admitted to be voting between 6 and 12 times for Obama. Admitted it on camera. She actually pled it down to 5 counts, and she was convicted in Ohio about 3 months ago on 5 counts of voter fraud. She could serve up to 4 counts. She could go to jail for up to 5 years. Is she in jail yet? Nope. But you've got to put pressure on your local elected officials. And that's a little bit about what the Verify system looks like. And let me get through here to the end. This is all about legislative action. Real quickly, in the couple minutes I have left, Mexico. We went to the country of Mexico and visited. They have a federal electoral system which is outside of the federal government, and I'm not advocating a federal electoral system. However, 99.3% of 18-year-olds have a photo voter ID. So when the progressive movement tells you that people from Latin America who come to this country are against voter ID and they're disenfranchised them, it is absolutely incorrect. You cannot name me a Latin country that does not have voter ID. And so that's some of the processes. And in the 1 minute I have before he drags me off, like the Gong, remember the Gong show where they'd have the music and that big? We have 3 initiatives that I would like you to also think about participating in or inviting others to participate in. One is called Voto Honesto. It is an initiative to get Latinos involved in election integrity, because I would tell you that their vote is sometimes at more risk than others depending on where they live. There's also an initiative called the Black Voters Alliance to engage the black community in election integrity, because despite what they may tell you, the progressive movement tells you, not all black people think alike, and there are many, 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 many who are for election integrity and want their voices to be heard. And the last one is called Next Gen Voters. It is an initiative for 16 to 26-year-olds, which I would tell you the pro-liberty side is weakest of all on that, reaching out to young people, and they are dying for you to come talk to them and engage with them. Homeschoolers are perfect candidates for that, so if you want to help build your team in Washington, I would love to talk to you more about some of those initiatives and how you can build a more diverse and younger, age-diverse team to try to help with election integrity. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll be back this afternoon with some more information.
I'm sure everybody out there will agree that the progressives, the liberals, the Democrats, they tend to kick our tail when it comes to community organizing. Well, I'll tell you something, folks. Straight from Washington, D.C. Leadership Institute, with regard to Grassroots Organization, please welcome Mr. Chris Doss.
Thank you. Thanks very much. You may know these words. He has sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. Who wrote those words? Anybody know? He has sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. Who said it? The Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson. Referring to King George III, he hath sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out our substance. If that was true in 1776 when he wrote them, is it not true today? Yes. OSHA, EPA, the IRS. Obamacare creates 16,000 new IRS agents, but no new doctors. What will those IRS agents do if not harass our people and eat out their substance? Thomas Jefferson also wrote something else that we should be mindful of. Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. And that is your job as grassroots lobbyists. Now, before we get started, let me warn you, I'm doing about a day's training on lobbying in 50 minutes. So buckle your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Hold on, I'll take questions in the break. And so you don't have to take such copious notes, I will send you these PowerPoints. But I need your email. And also, guess who the IRS regularly audits? The Leadership Institute. We're part of the lawsuit against the IRS. But one of the things we have to do is we have to document every time we do training. And that means we have to have signed sheets from students showing that we actually trained live bodies. You'll find at the end of each row a stack of yellow and blue sheets. We need to have a signature showing that we had live people in our training. Now, actually, the IRS is not going to track you down, so if you don't want to give me your real name, you can use the name that you used when you registered to vote with Acorn. But I do need your actual email address if you want me to mail you these PowerPoints. So if you fill out those sheets with a name, even the name you use when you register to vote with Acorn, that's fine with me. But give me your email address and I'll send you the PowerPoints. And that way you don't have to take such copious notes and you can follow the PowerPoints because I'm going to fly through them. I promise you. The yellow sheets are your chance to do a report card. Because as I say, I'm flying through this. I've condensed about 4 presentations into one. I'm going to fly through it. And it's your chance to tell me if I do anything well or if I do anything poorly. But if you're going to use outrageously nasty language to tell me how badly I've done, we would prefer that you not write it on these yellow sheets. Instead, I'd ask you to write it on the back of a $50 bill and I'll make sure the right person gets it. Okay? If you don't have a 50 in your pocket, a 20 will work. All right, let's get going here on grassroots lobbying. First thing we want to do is make sure the remote works, and it's not working.
It is. It's working behind you.
Oh, it is? Okay, sorry. Okay, well, let's go back here. Being right is not sufficient to win. This is a mistake we make on the right. Leftists understand that. They understand this is a war of words. This is a war of marketing. They understand that being right, being intellectually correct, being able to argue ideas is not what it takes in the culture to win. We don't understand that. We think if we can prove our ideas are right, we're going to win the battle. That's not enough. Point number 2, if it's not enough, why are you here? You owe it to your values, your children, to future generations, to learn what it takes to win. So, point number 3, political technology. And by political technology, what do I mean? I mean technology in the most ancient sense of that word. tools, techniques, tactics. That's neutral. The nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts of learning what it takes to win politically in a campaign or in lobbying. It's neutral, it works for both sides, and it's not cool, it's not motivating for people on the right. What motivates people on the right? Ideas. People on the right get motivated by speakers. Now, if Dr. Ben Carson had been here today to talk about Obamacare, how many people do you think would have been in this room? That's right. But you fill a room with people to tell them how to get things done, the nuts and bolts of getting things done, and how many people show up. It's not cool. It's not motivating to people on the right. It's just the opposite on the left. Why is that? What do we live for? We live for our families. We live for our cultural institutions, the church, our communities, the organizations that we're a part of, the places where we volunteer. What do people on the left live for? The almighty state. Society is perfected through the almighty state, and they study how to take the reins of power and how to hold it. Leadership Institute is the largest and the oldest organization on the right that trains people how to win in politics, and Leadership Institute is minuscule compared to the many organizations on the left. People go to Camp Wellstone. They take their kids and they spend a week in this camp where they study what it takes to win. And we do the best we can to get 40 people in a room to study the nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts. Because political technology, the nuts and bolts of learning what it takes to be effective, isn't cool. It doesn't turn us on. But utilizing technology is what it takes to win. Political success is determined by the number and effectiveness of the activists on the respective sides. Your time is not enough. Doing things that are effective is what it takes to win, and sadly, too many of the people on our side are putting a lot of time into the fight to save their nation, not understanding that the time they're putting in is in many cases totally ineffective and in some cases counterproductive. Okay, let's look first at power versus access. Now, you know what it's like when you elect a good person to a legislature. You elect a fine woman who's run on the platform of limited government, free markets. And she gets to Olympia, and some of the good old boys bring her in and they say, we're going to show you what it takes to get things done here. I'm going to take you under my wing, and I'm going to help you get your legislation through. I'll show you how things get done, what it takes to get the job done here. And very shortly after that, this person who was elected on a true blue platform begins to get co-opted. In 2010, there were 86 so-called Tea Party Republicans elected in Washington. And as soon as they got elected, the establishment said, hey, do you have anybody to be your chief of staff in Washington? Do you have anybody to be your legislative director? We'll help you staff your offices. And most of them staffed their offices with whom? People from their home districts? People who believed in the cause of liberty, free markets? Nope, with experienced Washington staffers. And what did that mean? Within a year, you could cut in half the number of those Tea Party Republicans who were still Tea Party Republicans. The same thing happens to you, to lobbyists who go to Olympia. and it's called power versus access. They convince you, so glad to see you. You're one smart cookie. I'm going to put you on my citizen advisory board. You know, I've got a breakfast for my citizen advisory board once a month. I come back to my home district in Walla Walla, Yakima. I want you to be there for my breakfast. In fact, I have a personal meeting with 4 or 5 people in Yakima every month. I'd like it. In fact, I'll schedule it around your schedule. What do you do? And is a dinner meeting better than a breakfast meeting? I need for you to go to your Tea Party and explain to them this vote. You know, this was a tough vote for me, and here's why I had to vote that way. And I need for you to explain that to your Tea Party. The next thing you know, you've got all the access in the world to this politician, but you have no power over that politician. Thomas Jefferson said, "Where the government fears the people, there is liberty. Where the people fear the government, there is tyranny." But in between tyranny and liberty, there's a lot of stupidity. And people don't know when they've been snookered. They have lots of access, but they have no power. Here's how it's supposed to work. You tell them how they're supposed to vote. You don't go back to your Tea Party explaining to your Tea Party why they had to vote wrong on the issue. And organizations over and over and over, and some of the biggest and best known organizations that some of you are members of and pay dues to, are what we call access-based organizations. They have access to the biggest names in Washington. And these Washington politicians will write flowery letters for them to raise money on. And they'll send them to you saying, "We now have 223 co-sponsors on our legislation that will do blah, blah, blah. And that legislation is never going to pass. But their organization is going to raise a lot of money off of that letter that's been signed by one of the most well-known and powerful politicians in Washington." And this is why we call it an access-based organization, because they're not accomplishing anything. Beware of becoming an access-based lobbyist. You are there to get a job done. Now, it's not your job to become hated, aggravating, but it's your job to remain true to your core principles and not to become an access-based lobbyist, but to become someone who is polite. You show your class through your manners, your courtesy, your ability to get along with people. But you stay true to your principles, and you don't become that person who says, "I'm on so-and-so's citizen advisory board. I got a birthday card from State Representative so-and-so." That is meaningless to me. And that leads us to the next dichotomy we want to look at: the difference between pleasure versus pain. There's a famous Russian psychologist named Pavlov who studied, among other animals, dogs, how to get dogs to do things. And he found out that dogs, just like people, respond to comfort and discomfort, pleasure and pain. And this is how politicians respond: pleasure and pain. There are certain things that are pleasure for a politician, and there are certain things that are pain for a politician. And that's what they look at. Now, your arguments for and against a bill are extremely important. But there's something that's more important than that. Raise your hand if you can tell me you think something you think is pleasure to someone running for office, an elected official. Raise your hand. What?
Money.
Money. Donations are a great sense of pleasure for anyone running for office. What else?
Endorsements.
Endorsements. endorsements from someone influential, someone who has clout, someone who has an ability to bring in more votes. That's a great sense of pleasure for someone running for elective office. What else? Votes. But getting 2 votes. Adulation. Good press. People saying good things about you in the press. Letters to the editor. People adoring you. That's excellent. That is precisely one of the things that brings pleasure to someone running for office. Now, let's think about some of the things that bring pain to someone running for elective office.
The ability to vote them out.
More directly, getting voted out of office is it, but let's think about some specifics. Raise your hand.
Disagreement with stuff he's in agreement with?
Well, give me a specific, something I can take to him and talk about. How about the reverse of what we've just been talking about? Well, a voting record, but you know, voting records work both ways. How about a lack of adulation? How about bad press? Letters to the editor complaining about that voting record. That's something concrete. How about money that starts drying up? Sources of money, donors who get unhappy with the elected official and no longer write checks. How about endorsements that are no longer there? How about volunteers who no longer show up, or better yet, volunteers who say, I will volunteer to go door to door for an opponent who runs against you in the general election or in the primary. Are you getting it now? You need to understand when you sit down with an elected official what causes that elected official pleasure and pain. You're sitting down with an elected official, and it's a dog. You put a plate of meat in front of a dog, and that causes that dog pleasure. You use an electric cattle prod with the dog, that causes the dog pain. You're dealing with a dog when you go to do your lobbying. Amen. And you've got to know what you're going to say that's going to cause pleasure and pain. Now, you need to be a little sophisticated about it, a little nuanced about it, but you need to walk out knowing that that particular elected official knows you can write letters to the editor and comments on articles that appear in the paper. Favorable comments or unfavorable comments. You can produce volunteers that will help that elected official get reelected. You can produce volunteers that can help a primary challenger get that politician out of office, or not necessarily get them out of office, make them have to work to get the renomination. Pleasure and pain yield results with politicians. Learn what motivates elected officials. Reward those elected officials who are doing good work. Those who are not, dangle that electric cattle prod in front of them. Raising awareness is not a measurable milestone. Matt mentioned a little earlier today in his presentation doing rallies. Now, when you do a rally in Olympia, for whom does it create pleasure and for whom does it create pain? A Well, let me ask the question another way. If a tree falls in a forest in northern Finland and there's no Washington state lobbyist there to hear it fall, for whom does it create a noise inside the state capitol in Olympia? This summer, there was yet another, the 6,257th Tea Party rally in Washington in front of the IRS building. Now, working for the Leadership Institute, an organization that provided 26,000 documents last year to the IRS, having trained Tea Parties who were audited and were asked for documentation related to Leadership Institute training that I provided, there is no one on planet Earth more incensed with the IRS than I am. But I want to ask you, when those several thousand Tea Party people came to Washington in July and held their rally in front of the IRS building, remember, after the IRS did all these audits, they got $70 million in performance bonuses. Did you get that story? All right, after these Tea Party rallies in front of the IRS building, how many IRS employees do you think were sacked or demoted or missed lunch or were denied any of that $70 million in bonuses? How many people on Capitol Hill paid any notice at all whatsoever to that Tea Party rally in front of the IRS building? Nobody. They didn't care. Nobody in Washington cared. Not even the commuters, because they're used to it. Because we've had 6,000 or 6 gazillion Tea Party rallies, and Tea Parties come to Washington to rally is not even a news story to anyone. It's not news. Rallies have to have a purpose that's part of a strategy or part of a response to something in particular. It has to be news. It has to have a news hook. It has to be noticed. And if it doesn't, if it's raising awareness, it's not raising awareness, and you have just wasted hours and hours and hours and lots of money on something that didn't do anything. Let me give you some examples of where it would have worked. This week in Northern Virginia, President Obama has sent National Park Service employees who have been deemed to be essential government employees to block several private parks, Mount Vernon being one of them, a privately held park. He sent National Park Service employees to set up barricades because National Park Service land surrounds Mount Vernon. Now, if the Tea Parties in Virginia wanted to hold a rally that would have gotten some notice, they would have been up there doing the same thing around Mount Vernon that World War II vets were doing around the World War II memorial. That would take some notice, and that would accomplish something. It's a response to something specific. 2 years ago, a woman named Arlene Ocasio, director of the Houston Veterans Cemetery in Houston. Now, the Houston National Veterans Cemetery is owned by whom? The what? The Houston National Veterans Cemetery. Who owns the National Veterans Cemetery? We do. It's ours. It's a National Veterans Cemetery. Arlene Ocasio decided 2 years ago, in her position as a government functionary, director of the cemetery, whose job it is to make sure the grass is mowed, whose job it is to make sure that the shrubbery gets trimmed, to make sure the right grave gets opened up if they send a soldier back from Afghanistan, and make sure that the grave gets closed up right after the funeral. She decided in her infinite wisdom that there would be no more religious funerals inside the gates of the Houston Veterans Cemetery, no prayers, no poems of a religious nature, in fact, no utterances of a list of words that included God, Jesus, Allah, Amen. And when she came out with that edict in this cemetery that we own, contrary to the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, that would have been a time for Christian conservatives, Tea Party people, to have held a rally, to have gone down to the Houston Veterans Cemetery and positioned themselves in the Tebow position and just watch for her to see what she would do. But there was no rally. That's the kind of thing that makes a rally useful. But let's paint some signs and go stand on the side of the Capitol building. It isn't even news anymore. We all do what is familiar to us. We do what we know how to do because it's familiar to us. But just because it is familiar to us doesn't mean that it's effective. We need to learn how to do things that are effective. Sun Tzu says, choose your battles. You heard Matt a little earlier today talk about the hydra that is the left. They create and they foment many battles for us. They introduce legislation that they don't even care about just to get our energies dispersed. Or they look at legislation that we've introduced that they don't really care that much about, but they fan the flames to get us working on as many different things as possible to disperse our energies. We have to pick our battles as carefully as we possibly can. Now, one of the sets of criteria that you can use to pick your battles is this 4-point set of questions. When you're looking at legislation, you cannot fight for or against everything going on in the state capitol. And you're going to look at things and you say, oh, this is important, this is important, this is important, this is important. And yes, there are lots of things that are important, and you're going to feel guilty not fighting this bad legislation or not fighting for this good legislation. But you can't be everywhere, and the left knows that. That's why they're trying to keep you busy. So ask yourself these questions before you get into too many battles. Does this battle build membership and raise money? That's a legitimate question. Can I get people to rally around this cause? Can I use it to bring new people into our movement? And can I use it to bring money into our movement? Question number 2, does this battle help my friends? Who are your friends? Your friends are the solid people in the legislature, those few legislators who are solid and always stick with you. Your friends are your allies, coalition members, groups that are always at your side and don't throw you overboard. Number 3, does this hurt my enemies? Does this help divide my enemies? Does this make them look bad? You look at the shutdown. One of the things I love in one of my pages on Facebook called Revolutionary Communications, I love posting how Obama chooses not to do cancer treatments for kids, but he finds enough money to send National Park Service employees to shut down private businesses. This is a good way to hurt our enemies. You take your battles and you use them to hurt your enemies. Obamacare is the law of the land, isn't it? Yes, the Obama administration thinks it's the law of the land, just like our immigration laws are the law of the land, right? Just like the Defense of Marriage Act was the law of the land, right? Use it to hurt your enemies. And will this battle, whether you win or lose, result in a better public policy outcome? So what is lobbying, actually? Lots of people don't like lobbying and don't want to get involved with you when you're lobbying. So you have to remind them that lobbying is, in essence, simply the First Amendment, the right to petition the government. Now, lobbying is a lot of things. It includes meetings with members, and that's what you're here to talk about today. But you got to remember, it's not just lobbying members and those lobbying days in Olympia, but you've got to coordinate it with your grassroots people at home. Because lobbying is a lot of other things too. It's town hall meetings, for example. And it's especially those appearances by legislators when they go into their home districts where you can get a lot done. It's your best opportunity to get public officials on the record on policy issues. And the key words here are on the record. What you want to do is get them on the record. And you want to have your people prepared beforehand. Hone your message. We'll talk a little bit more about honing your message in just a moment. When they appear in local home district meetings, you want to have multiple people lined up to ask them the question. You're going to focus on one issue, maximum 3 issues, no more than that. Now, when you've got your person, and there's one in every crowd who has their issue they want to talk about, drug legalization, you got to have somebody at the meeting who's got a pair of socks in the pocket. Be ready to stuff them in that person's mouth. Your agenda at this meeting is this one issue, maximum 3 issues. You've got to have your question lined up. You've seen Jeopardy. Make sure your answer is in the form of a question. You've got to have a question that's written not open-ended, but calls for a specific answer. Not, what do you think about the Second Amendment? Oh, I'm all for the Second Amendment. But will you commit to making sure that you kill this bill that's going to demand universal background checks? Your question has to be written in such a way that it calls for a very specific answer, not open-ended. Now, politicians have been trained to tap dance, and they're going to tap dance anyway. They're not going to give you a specific answer. That's why you have multiple people ready to ask the question. And those multiple people are scattered about the room. So that the first time the politician gets asked the question by the lady on the front row, the politician tap dances. Now, you've got multiple people there with their little video apparatus who are filming all this, who are videotaping it. And 2 or 3 questions later, the gentleman over here on the left is going to say, I'd like to get back to that question that that lady on the front row asked you, and you didn't really answer it. It called for a specific answer. What you want to know is, are you specifically going to commit to going before the committee, hearing this bill, and making sure it gets killed in committee so we're never going to see universal background checks? It's a pretty specific question, and you really didn't give an answer. He's going to tap dance again. Guess what? The person in the middle of the room, 5 minutes later, is going to ask the same question. And it's going to happen 2 or 3 times, and the politician's eventually going to get the picture that multiple people, it's a setup. But you've got it on the record. And what are you going to do with it? YouTube, Facebook. Now, if the politician gives you the right answer and gives you a commitment, what do you do when you get it on Facebook? You praise the politician. You tell everybody, send a note to this politician thanking him for his commitment on this issue. If the politician gives the wrong answer, send a letter to this politician saying he's taken the wrong stance on the issue. If the politician tap dances, you say, if you don't know who Bojangles Robinson is, you need to watch this video. And if any of you don't know who Bojangles Robinson is, you need to Google it. And you make fun of the politician, because there's nothing more infuriating to a politician than to be made fun of. And when you've got 3 or 4 little vignettes of the politician tap dancing 3 or 4 times on the same question, you've got it. When you have these meetings, when you go to these meetings, orchestrate it carefully. If the politician's not having his own town hall meeting, invite him to a meeting. But you got to have good attendance. You got to guarantee good attendance. And remember, however many people you have, you got to pack the room. You got to make the room look full. So if you're going to have 30 people in a room, you got to have the room set up for 29. You got to have a room that holds 50 if you're going to have 55 people there. You need to have good attendance. You need, again, to have that well-crafted message, reinforce it. Sometimes you may need to do that with signs, t-shirts, whatever. Collateral activities. Whether you're in Olympia or you're focusing on your at-home town hall meetings, in both cases, you always need to keep your at-home, in the district people engaged in these kinds of collateral activities. Building support for your cause. During the sessions in Olympia, at these meetings, you have letters coming from individuals, letters coming from your coalition organizations. You make sure blogs and letters to the editor are generated on an ongoing basis. If they're published in the newspapers, you clip them out and send them along with a note. I wrote this letter to the editor, want to make sure your office saw it. Send it to the legislator. You get on Facebook and social media, but not just to your little echo chamber of friends. It's got to go to different people. And that means you're going to send Facebook personal messages outside of your comfort zone friends, outside of the people that you see at your meetings, to people that you don't see who never come to your meetings. And call-in radio shows, targeted direct mail. Targeted direct mail is nothing sophisticated. That just means you send a postcard to a couple of your neighbors, a couple of people who live in the same district with you, and you write a personal note on it saying, I knew you'd be interested in this piece of legislation. Could you take 5 minutes to either send a note or pick up the phone and call this legislator's office? What about those meetings with public officials? They're usually not that interested in seeing you, and even when they do, it's tough going. Remember, during session, they're awfully busy. It's tough to set up a meeting. You might not be able to get a meeting just whenever you want to. You might not be able to meet with a legislator. You might have to meet with staff members, and it may not always be effective because of how fast the legislation might be moving. So do your homework beforehand. Know where the issue is. Has the bill been introduced? Where is it in the legislative process? Exactly what can your lobbying accomplish? Know that before you get there. Have you mobilized your coalitions? Where are they? Are they involved with you? Do you know your issue, or at least that aspect of the issue you want to discuss? Fighting Obamacare, you don't have to know all 2,800 pages of Obamacare, but you have to know your piece of the puzzle. What is it going to cost the state of Washington in 5 years if you expand Medicare? That's all you need to know. You don't have to know all 2,800 pages of it. Do you know the scope of whoever you're meeting with? Is it a legislator? Is it a gubernatorial appointee that you need to meet with? Is this person a bill sponsor? Are they on the relevant committee that's going to hear the bill? Do they have expertise in this field? Or is it a field that they don't know anything about and you're coming in with a lot of facts and figures that they're not going to grasp anyway? What is their district geography and demographics? What impact will that have on them? What's the term of office? Are they going to run for re-election? What kind of coalition supporters do they have in their re-election? What impact will that have on them? Be polite, respectful, prepared, brief, efficient, get to the point. You've only got a few minutes. You got to jump on it. Be specific, look and act the part. Keep in mind, you're going to have to be flexible. Know how much time you've had. Meet with a purpose. Relate your cause to the officials' constituents. Be people-oriented. Know who's in the district. And relate the issue to that official's constituents and voters. Follow up with thank you notes. You can never say thank you too many times. Visit other committee members as needed, committee chairmen, legislators, potential allies, and sometimes even opposing groups. You can dampen their enthusiasm in some cases. Remember, hone your message. Tailor it to your audience, the specific legislator. Know the legislator's personality types. Some legislators, some people are more logical. They base their decisions on logic. Some are more emotive personality types. You have to reach them on emotion. Figure that out. This is a grid, whether you're running for office, dealing with legislation, no matter what you do, you ought to follow this grid. Get in a room, take paper up on all four walls. On one wall, put up all this perspective verbiage that you might be using to describe yourself, your side of the issue. On one wall, cover all the perspective verbiage you might use to describe the other side. On one wall, put up all of the verbiage the other side might use in talking about you. And on the fourth wall, put up all the verbiage they might use in talking about themselves. Be as inclusive as possible. Get everything up there so you never get blindsided. And then analyze what you've got up there to try and refine what you're going to hear. Here are some ideas you might hear if we were doing this exercise for Tea Party versus progressives. We say we're for liberty, individual responsibility, private charity, freedom of religion, smaller government. They say we're a bunch of racists, or if we're black, Hispanic, Asian, we're not authentic, we're narrow-minded, we're misogynist, we're uncaring. You do this exercise and then you analyze, where are we falling into traps? Where could we say things better? And so, for example, we say we believe in the founder's vision. They say we look to the past. Review what you've said and see if there's a better way to say it so that we're not reinforcing what they're saying about us. Maybe we should say universal values instead. Analyze that, figure out a better way of saying it. When they ask you questions or use verbiage that is contrary to the verbiage you want to use about your issue, you have to transition out of it using certain transition phrases. They say, for example, you're supporting school reform, school choice. And they say, why is it you're opposed to universal education, the term they use for supporting public monopoly schools? You say, well, the friends and parents I talk to say the most important thing to them is to remember that all children learn differently. Children are individuals and have individual and unique learning needs, and we need to offer them as broad a range of choices as possible, and one-size-fits-all education doesn't work for all children. Don't answer questions based on their terminology, their verbiage, and if you've done this 4 boxes analysis, you have a better chance of anticipating how they might hit you up with questions. We've got a few more tips. We'll go over a few more of them in the workshop this afternoon. Thank you very much. It's time for a break.
Without further ado, well, wait a minute. I think we're ready.
Close.
Just about.
Did you have another one you want me to take up there?
All righty. Now, a couple of weeks ago, folks, to promo this particular
Center
event
for
here,
Self-Governance.
I had a wonderful opportunity to interview a gentleman with the Tennessee Center for Self-Governance. His name is Herr. And that was a great interview. So I'll tell you what, folks, once again, let's please give it up for Mr. Kurt Potter of the Tennessee Center for Governance.
Yeah, I think 45 minutes.
You bet.
I'll get you with the 5-minute mark here.
All right, great. How y'all doing? Can you hear me? Okay. No? Am I on? All right, excellent. My name's Kurt Potter. I'm with the Center for Self-Governance, formerly Tennessee Center for Self-Governance, but it's been kind of an interesting ride here. We started teaching classes, I guess about a year and a half ago, last May, and through May through December, we ended up teaching 71 classes inside the state of Tennessee. And people started coming into Tennessee from outside of Tennessee to come take our classes. This year we have picked up and we've taught almost 600 people this year. And we've taught in, I think it's 8 states now. And we've got 9 other states on the books to teach in, and we've got requests from 31 different states. So it's been an absolutely crazy ride. Thank you. I'm not exactly a professional speaker. You'll see that in the way I present, but at the same time, I think this is an important message that I need to get out and give to you guys. I've got a team of four people here there in the state of Tennessee, and we've been working together on legislative process. We've got a bill called the Healthcare Compact that we were pushing inside the state legislature, and when we got there, we were making a lot of mistakes. And the mistakes we were making are just absolute freshman mistakes, but everybody's got to start somewhere, right? Well, as we started pushing our bill, one of the things that happened was we got really good at it. It was amazing. As we took the lumps and we were figuring out our way to get legislation to move through the system, we ended up actually pushing legislation beyond the other lobbyists that were there in the legislature working against us. One year we pushed a piece of legislation all the way to the floor, the House floor. The lobbyists, the professional lobbyists, had spent $130,000 to stop us from pushing this legislation. The amazing piece was that we had the leadership, actually the Republican leadership, because Tennessee's a supermajority, who are trying to stop us from taking power from the federal level and bringing it down to the state level. As we're going through this whole process, it was amazing to see the power of a citizen. You guys don't understand, or most people, I'm not going to say you guys specifically, but most people don't understand the power that is inherently inside of a citizen and the power that you can wield. Most people think that the money is the power. It doesn't. It's not. It doesn't exist that way. What money is a force multiplier. And you guys have the true power, because when we look at power as it resides in the political process, power resides in the district. And when you guys learn to throw those power levers and measure the power output that you are producing, it's amazing what you guys can achieve. There we go. So where do we go from here? We started out as a bunch of Tea Party groups and activists, and we're moving forward. I'm going to tell you guys a little story here. Most of you guys know the story of Benjamin Franklin. In 1787, as he's coming out of the Constitutional Convention, he's approached by a woman named Mrs. Powell. Now, Mrs. Powell is a fabulous woman, all right? As a matter of fact, I think I've fallen in love with Mrs. Powell. She's absolutely incredible. But the story goes that Mrs. Powell comes up to Benjamin Franklin and says, "What have you given us? A monarchy or a republic?" And what does he say? "A republic, madam, if you can keep it." Now I want you guys to think about this for a minute. What was the condition of women in 1787? They didn't have any property rights, did they? They couldn't vote. They couldn't hold political office. Now how was Mrs. Powell supposed to keep the republic? The fact is she had power. Mrs. Powell may not have been able to vote, but she was married.
Her husband could vote, right? We all know that if mom ain't happy, ain't nobody happy, right? So, I mean, obviously she's going to wield a stick there. But beyond that, the interesting story about Mrs. Powell and the power she was able to wield. Mrs. Powell's husband was the last governor of Philadelphia under the Crown. They actually had a boarding house for wealthy travelers coming through Philadelphia. Because of that, Benjamin Franklin had stayed there, Samuel Adams had stayed there, George Washington had stayed there. Mrs. Powell is credited for being the person who talked George Washington into running for his second term of office. He didn't want to run for a second term. Actually, George Washington had his own issues back in Mount Vernon that he wanted to go deal with. And so she ultimately had the ability to gain influence with George Washington and totally changed our course and direction forever. That's the power of a citizen. But how do we do it? One of the things that I wanted to ask you guys, what is a right? Who can tell me what a right is? Anybody? What's that?
Something bestowed on us by God is a natural right.
So it's bestowed on you by God, but is that what a right is? Because what a right is, here I'm just going to throw it up. A right is a just claim to something. And so it's interesting because we talk about our Constitution all the time and how the Constitution gives me a right to do this and it gives me a right to do that. But is a right the same thing as power? It's a very precarious position because we often think of our rights as being our power. And it's not even close. So, what is power? Power is activity causing or preventing an action. It's strength or force producing an effect. So, you may have the right to something, you may have a just claim, but do you have the power to grab a hold of your claim? And then the other side of that is, does somebody else have the power to keep you from your claim? I think the answer is most definitely yes. What's really interesting, I saw a meme this week that somebody had thrown up on the internet, and it had the Gadsden flag. And underneath it, it said, meaningless. It said, don't tread on me, it said, meaningless. You've been tread on. Now what? And it's a great point. Because here's the thing, is we all talk about the government as if they have come in and usurped our power. I'm here to tell you that is not the case. The government has usurped nothing. We have abdicated it. And the fact is that the power has not changed. It still resides right here. We can still wield that power. I hear a lot of people in my travels talk about the possibility of a revolution at some point or something along those lines. I've been to war twice. I can tell you guys that is not where you want to go. But the time for that to happen is when you are no longer able to wield your power inside our governance system. We have that ability today. So, what is self-governance? I want to get past this notion. And it's an amazing thing to me to watch because we have a lot of people inside of our country who believe that self-governance is doing what you want to do. You having the ability to control or govern yourself. That is not what self-governance is. That is a very selfish notion that I get to go do what I want to do. What self-governance is a self-determined man exercising individual liberty, personal and civic accountability, and the responsibility for the control of instituted government. Self-governance is Mrs. Powell controlling her government. And so, when it comes to us controlling our government, my job is not to control the government so I can go do whatever it is that I want to go do. My job is there to empower Mrs. Powell so she can control her instituted government. The fact is, if you look at Mrs. Powell, and the idea that Benjamin Franklin said, it's a republic if you can keep it. Did he say it was a republic if your representative could keep it? No. Is it a republic if your neighbors can keep it? No. The fact is, it's a republic if you can keep it. And so it's incumbent on us, it's all of us. It is our duty to control our instituted government. And we have not been doing that. We've been in pursuit of our own goals, our own desires. And this is the amazing thing about this. People who are interested in self-governance generally aren't interested in governing other people, are they? We all said, you know what? I want the government to keep their hands off of me, and I don't want to go put my hands on anybody else. And it's a great notion. But the problem is there are people out there in the world who want more than anything to control us. And it really is shaped up by two worldviews. I want you guys to think about Plato. Plato actually wrote a book called The Republic. And the idea behind the Republic is Plato wanted to determine what a just society is. And so from Plato's Republic, what he says is, if we're going to have a just society, the people have to work for the good of the collective. But he understands that, you can't force people necessarily, or people aren't going to willingly go and produce for the collective and do what's good for the collective. So he decides to create, in his idea, the warrior class that is going to force the people to do what's right for the collective. But he realizes that the warrior class cannot make the rules because they're just going to be too violent, right? They will end up being the people who force their will on these poor serfs, right? So he says, okay, what we have to have is the elite. The elite are going to be the folks who are going to create these just laws in this good society. And the elite are going to create the rules. The warrior class is going to enforce the rules. The people will create and produce for the collective, and therefore we'll have a just society. But then he realizes, the elite, they could become corrupt, right? So he thinks to himself, he's like, all right, how do I get around that corruption? He says, you know what? I know exactly. Only the people who seek truth need to be part of that elite. And in his day, who were the only people seeking truth? The philosophers. The great thing about this is, what did Plato do for a living? He was a philosopher, right? Very self-serving. Right? Here's the thing. I agree with Plato's idea. The only thing is, I believe that people who teach self-governance should be the ruling elite. Sorry, it's a bad joke. Anyway, but then the other worldview that wraps up around that is Aristotle. Aristotle was actually Plato's student. And so what ends up happening with Aristotle is, he says, I think Plato's all wet. He says, Plato, these people that we're talking about have the ability to think and reason and take empirical evidence and gain from that. And because they can do that, they need to have a hand in their governing. And so that hand in their governing, he starts to say, you know what? If people do engage in government, I'm going to create a word that defines that. And that word is citizen. And so you've got these two worldviews that ultimately shape up. And so you've got the left, which we all sit there and talk about how the left wants to destroy our country, or we talk about how the left wants to do this and do that. The fact is what they're really interested in is centralized governance. They want to centralize governance so that they can have the ruling elite. If you think about the media, how is it that the media comes about with the stories that they tell and the angle on which they tell the stories? They want to become the ruling elite. If you go into any journalism school inside the country, you grab one of those students, you pull them off to the side, and you say, why do you want to be a journalism student? They're not going to sit there and tell you, because I want to report facts objectively. That's not their purpose. They want to change society. They have a vision for what they want for our society, and that's their intent. They want to become the ruling elite. We cannot sit on the sidelines and allow that to happen. Otherwise, it will happen to us. We have to engage. We have to become citizens. So, now I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about the difference between civic responsibility and civic authority. One of the things that is a concept that we teach that most people don't think about is the fact that the government derives its just powers from where? The consent of the governed, right? So if they are receiving, or if they derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, what does that mean about the governed? It means we have a certain authority, doesn't it? So I want you guys to think about this for a second. If we have authority, how do we wield that authority? Your civic authority is like a sword. If you've got a soldier that doesn't know how to wield his sword, he's a danger to himself and he's a danger to his buddies, isn't he? But the minute he understands how to wield his sword, he becomes powerful. It's the same thing with us. So, the difference between civic authority and civic responsibility, I'm going to give you kind of an anecdote here. You guys all live at home, I assume. So, you guys have the responsibility to make sure your roof doesn't leak, don't you? That's a civic responsibility, or that's a responsibility to make sure that your roof doesn't leak. But you have the authority to determine who walks through your front door. Two totally different ideas. We often think of our civic responsibility, which civic responsibility is our ability to act in a governmental capacity. So, for example, voting would be part of your civic responsibility. Being on a jury, for example, would be part of your civic responsibility, but that is not your civic authority. All right. So I'm gonna show you guys a picture here. This is civic responsibility, and you got all those people lined up and they're voting. This right here, I've got to tell you a story about. This woman right here, her name is Delane Stewart. She's a Tea Party member in Cookeville, Tennessee. This right here is Ryan Williams. This is her state representative. Now, as we're pushing bills through the Tennessee legislature, we end up in a Health and Human Services committee, and Ryan was one of the freshmen in that committee. There were actually 4 freshmen who were in that committee that the leadership told them, we need you guys to get up and walk out so that we can kill this bill quietly. So they get up and they leave the committee, and it's an amazing thing because Mark, my partner, I've got 3 other partners you'll see at the end of the presentation, literally walks follows one of them, a guy named Cameron Sexton, into the bathroom stall and is standing there. Cameron, why did you walk out? Doesn't answer him. Turns around, zips up, leaves. And so now all of a sudden we figured, oh my goodness, our bill is stalled. What do we do with this now? So we started thinking about where can we have some power? Where can we have some influence? We decided that because power resides in the district, I want you guys to say that for me. The power resides in the district. Now, come on, let's hear it. The power resides in the district. Because the power resides in the district, with each of the people who live in that district for that representative, we decided that we needed to go to the district to learn to wield that power. So we set out to have ground games in all 4 of those districts for those representatives. And it was kind of a funny story because the first one, we show up in his district, we start knocking doors, we end up working with a Tea Party there, and it was amazing because we got through the entire week, and as we're getting ready to roll out of town, the representative from that district calls us on our bat phone. So we went and bought like a little burn phone that we could use for the process. And so we get this phone call, and this representative says, yeah, my name is Billy Jim Joe Bob, or whatever he said his name was, and he said, I got this orange flyer on my door. He's like, what's this all about? And so we started explaining it to him. He's like, oh, okay, yeah, this is Representative Scotty Campbell, and I'll call off the police investigation. He thought, I don't know what he thought, but he'd actually called the police to investigate what was going on in his district. Why all of a sudden all these people inside the district were getting a hold of him, asking him why he had walked out on that committee. So think about this. And what I want you guys to notice here are these cards. What we did when we went out to those districts was we created a flyer with a picture of the representative on it. And we contacted all the people who had voted for them, or people who had voted in the primary, and people who had given them money. And so we went into the district and we're knocking those doors. And we asked the folks at the doors, if they weren't there, we'd leave them a flyer. If they were there, we would explain the bill to them, and we said, look, the healthcare compact is here so that we can stand up to the federal government and keep our healthcare making decisions here in the state of Tennessee. And so we had people sign a postcard that said, I want you to support HB 369, the healthcare compact. I want to make my own healthcare decisions here in Tennessee, not have them made by somebody in Washington, D.C. Excuse me. Thank you. So what's amazing is each of those districts, we ended up with between 400 and 600 of those postcards. That's the stack of postcards right there from her district. And so anyway, the second district we came to was a guy by the name of Cameron Sexton. So we get into Cameron Sexton's district. We're in there about 3 or 4 days, and all of a sudden we get a phone call from Cameron Sexton. What are you doing in my district? And so we explained it to him, and he's like, you know what? I've been contacted by a bunch of folks. You have my vote. You know, there's no need for you to go on any further. We're like, thank you, but we're going to finish out, and we'll see you down at the legislature. All right. The funniest part was the very next one, Ryan Williams' district. We go into his district, and the first night we're there, we talk to the Tea Party group that's there, and we start setting up for the ground game. The ground games in the two previous districts had been effective enough to where it was already creating a buzz at the legislature. The next morning, we're at breakfast, he calls us on the bat phone and starts chewing my partner Mark's butt for 45 minutes. Now, if you ever see Mark, I want you guys to make him turn sideways, because his pants are really saggy because he's got a really flat butt, because this guy chewed it off. All right? And it's amazing because this guy, I mean, talk about arrogant. You don't have any business being in my district. You don't need to be talking to my constituents. And it's like, oh, it is on like Donkey Kong. Oh, you think the other two had it bad. Wait till we come to your doors. And so we end up going through his district like a herd of locusts. And what was really cool about it was we were running out of money. Because we had raised a little bit of money from some other groups that were around to help run these ground games, to pay for the paper and all that other sort of stuff that we were having to burn. And so anyway, we were trying to figure out how we were going to do the 4th district because we didn't have any money to do it. What was really awesome is by the time we got to the end of his district, the 4th representative called us on the phone and said, you don't need to come to my district. I already know you're coming, and I'm with you, 100%. And it was awesome because I want you guys to take a look at something. Talking about civic authority. Who's in the dominant position here? She is. Who's submissive here? He is. He was the tiger that was going to call us and chase us off out of his district. And now look at it. Our government is like a Rottweiler. What is the condition of a Rottweiler? A Rottweiler wants to be the alpha male, right? Or the alpha dog inside of the relationship. It wants to take control. If you do not maintain control of your Rottweiler, eventually it will get out of control and it will take control. Now, can you regain control of that Rottweiler? Absolutely you can. Here's the thing though. It takes effort to regain control of that Rottweiler. You guys have to actively go out and make a concerted effort to regain that control. Once you do, all of a sudden it's just a little bit of effort every day to sit down and say, sit, roll over, and to maintain the dominance in that relationship. And so that's really what it comes down to, is we have to be able to maintain the dominance in that relationship. What's really cool about the healthcare compact, I'm going to give you guys another quick anecdote and story, is that we pushed that all the way to the floor, the House floor. And it got killed on the House floor. Well, what's amazing is the person who killed it was the Republican caucus chair. Her name was Deborah Maggart. Now, what happened with Deborah Maggart was she ended up in a primary battle over that and another bill. We had gone with Tea Party Patriots to Wisconsin to work on the Scott Walker recall ground game. And when we came back from that, we ended up 3.5 weeks left in that election. Deborah Maggart, being the Republican caucus chair, had $180,000 in her campaign coffers. 3.5 weeks left to go. Courtney Rogers, her challenger, was down 15 points in the polls, had no money, and no name recognition. Now you think if that's the case, it's time to walk away, because the reality is you're not going to win that election, right? So Jeff Hartline, her campaign manager, knew that we were back in town, gave us a call and said, can you come help us out? And so we said, sure, we'll come take a look. So we totally re-engineered her ground game. And now what you have to understand is we are not paid lobbyists. We are citizens. And I mean, before we got into doing this, I was building pricing models for an insurance company. So, this is not something that I'm one of you. I mean, I'm nobody special. And the amazing thing is I don't give money to parties, I don't give money to candidates, and I generally don't endorse anybody. So where does this power come from? It comes from the district. It comes from Mrs. Powell in her district. And so with the Courtney Rogers campaign, we get back, and what we inherently know is that ultimately it's Mrs. Powell who's going to swing this thing, if anything's going to swing. So we build this ground game around Mrs. Powell. How do we get to Mrs. Powell, tell her the inside story of how Deborah Maggart had voted for a bill but actually orchestrated its defeat on the House floor? And so what ends up happening is we re-engineer the ground game, and we go out and start telling the story at the doors to Mrs. Powell. That campaign moved the polls so quickly that Deborah Maggart had to go to TV and radio to get her campaign message out. She burned so much money so quickly that they had to get a hold of Bob Corker, who's our U.S. Senator up in Washington, D.C., get Kim Kagi, his finance chair, to fly into Tennessee, get on a plane with our Speaker of the House, and fly across the state of Tennessee, raising more money for that campaign. Now, caucus chairs, the reason they become caucus chairs generally is because they've got so much money that they can ultimately feed into other Republican races or Democrat races if they're a Democrat caucus chair. But the point is that they can feed other people in the party. We not only bankrupted her in terms of her coffers, ultimately in 3.5 weeks she went through $330,000 to our 11 to not just lose the race, but we went from 3.5 weeks being 15 points behind in the polls to winning that race by 18 points. That's the power of a citizen. And you guys, it is inherent in every one of you. If you guys are willing to go out and empower Mrs. Powell, it's amazing the effect that you guys can have. Oops. I don't know, can we lose that or? Oh. No, it's all right. So, what do we do? It's interesting, when we started getting into teaching these classes, one of the biggest problems I had was there were a lot of constitutional theory courses out there. Hillsdale College has got an awesome class. American Majorities class was really good. But the biggest problem I had with all these classes was they would teach you constitutional theory, but they'd never teach you how to apply it. And so I'd walk out going, oh yeah, that's a great idea. How do I make this happen? And so what we decided to do was take what we had learned and turn that into an application course. And so we have 5 levels of training. The first one is Foundations in Self-Governance. For you guys to do this, we have to take you outside of your comfort zone. You guys have a great deal of conventional wisdom that has been instilled in you for the last however many years you've been living. What's amazing is we always think about government or politics in terms of left versus right, Democrat versus Republican, right? But the fact is if you buy into that model, you're buying into the centralized governance side of the scale. If you want to decentralize that, if you want to self-govern, then ultimately what you have to do is stop buying into that side of the scale. And so we have to kind of reframe the way you think about this, as opposed to saying, okay, that's the Democrats versus the Republicans and how am I going to affect that? You don't even have to affect that. I don't even think about Democrat and Republican anymore. It's almost one thing to me because it's so centralized in terms of the governance. I don't even think about candidates and issues the same way anymore. We run around all the time going, oh my gosh, here's this issue, here's Common Core, I got to put this out. Oh my gosh, here's this here, Agenda 21, I got to put this out. And we run around constantly on the defense. And so, let me ask you guys, watch football, football games or any other kind of game. How many times does the team that's always on defense end up winning? Do you score points being on defense? Generally not. What we have to do is quit focusing on the grass fires and go pay attention to the arsonist. And so we have to reframe the way you guys think about your governance. So that's level 1, foundations. Level 2 is communicating for effective self-governance. Once you guys get through that first level of training, what we end up doing is we end up trying to teach you guys how to communicate those messages. We have homework in between the levels. And this is kind of important for you guys because one of the biggest problems I have with a lot of training that's out there today is you go sit in a classroom, you learn the stuff that they're teaching you, like the constitutional theory, they give you a nice book, and then you go home and put the book on the shelf and you sit on the couch. We will not change our country by sitting on the couch. We've been doing that far too long. So, what we do is we actually engage you in the process. You come to level 1, there's a paper that you end up writing on an issue that's important to you. And then there's also, we actually have you go out and build relationships with your legislators. You will not come to level 2 unless your homework is done for level 1. I don't even let you in the door. All right? Because here's ultimately the deal. All right? We don't charge enough for these classes to pay for itself. I have to constantly go out and try to raise funding for what we do. If I'm going to have to go out and do the fundraising for this, and people aren't willing to get off their butts to go do the work, then I'm not going to work to make them slide through the system. What I want is people who are willing to go out there and empower Mrs. Powell. So, the homework becomes hugely important. Level 2 is communicating for effective self-governance. We take that issue that you wrote on. Go ahead, 5 minutes, yeah. All right, we take that issue that you guys wrote on, and you guys will learn to communicate that effectively to multiple messengers, or to multiple publics. Then we give you a macro understanding of government. How does the government really work? It's amazing how we, as society or as citizens, don't really understand the process. So then level 4 is the micro understanding. Yeah, this is how government works, but once you're on the inside, here's what really happens. Here's what you see inside of the committees, for example. It's interesting to realize all of a sudden that the committees are political theater, and that really all they are is a sieve to try and kill bills before they can get to the House floor. And then the last one is pathway to self-governance and teamwork. So levels 1 and 2 are about you individually exercising your civic authority. Levels 3, 4, and 5 are about you guys coming together as a team because the whole is worth more than the sum of the parts. To exercise your civic authority takes a lot of time, effort, and energy, but you get on a team and you guys work together as a team, you guys can do this within a few hours a week that you guys are already using, but now all of a sudden you guys are using it effectively. So, what now? We ask you to visit our website. That's tncsg.org. It'll be on the next slide. We need donations. Anybody who's willing to give us some support. It's funny, the people who really are the big donors inside this country want to donate for their own influence. There's really not a lot of incentive to get Mrs. Powell to use her influence. And if they do want to train Mrs. Powell, most of the time it's because they want to drive a certain policy. We don't drive policy. You guys do that. We don't choose your issues. You guys choose your issues. We just teach you the process. Take the training. There's several classes that are going to be coming up here in Washington, and we ask you guys to come take it. Learn what we're teaching. Connect us with other Mrs. Powells. You guys know the other folks inside the state who are trying to do the same thing you guys are doing. Connect us together with them. And finally, build a team. Remember that the influence that you guys can wield as a team is so much more than you can wield individually. It's amazing. So, this is my team right here. You got my handsome face on the end. You got Michelle, Rachel, and Mark. And we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. We've all, it's amazing the people who are here, what they have sacrificed to do this. Michelle has 4 children. She's now working almost 80 hours a week for almost nothing. Rachel has had to go out and work other jobs and still dedicates probably 40 hours a week to what we're doing, and now she's trying to dedicate 80 hours a week to what we're doing. Mark does this for nothing. He's on an Air Force retirement pension, and he ends up spending his own money to make this happen. All right? So, I want to say thank you. This is us, the Center for Self-Governance. Website, tncsg.org. And you can email us at info@tncsg.org and our phone number. I thank you guys. Please, if you have any questions, comments, characterizations, whatever, meet me in the back of the room, let me know, and I'll be happy to talk to you guys. Thank you so much.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Herr Potter from the Tennessee Center for Self-Governance. If memory serves me correct, I believe your organization was started back in 2006, correct?
No, actually, we actually started, let's see, this is 13, so we met September of 2011. We were citizens working inside the legislature before that.
You bet.
And so we met to pull this all together and say, okay, how are we going to train people in September? And then in the following May, we started actually teaching classes.
Oh, you bet.
Thank you.
Well, the way I understand it, there were 4 people in the beginning. They were so fed up with it, what they did was decide to lock themselves in a room and not come out until they came out with an outline of what then became the Center for Self-Governance. And these folks are traveling nationwide giving seminars just like this. All right, now our next speaker is going to be Congressman Louie Gohmert, and he's going to be communicating to us from Texas, and that is going to be via Skype, and that is going to start right at 11:30. Now, if I can impose, ladies and gentlemen, and ask you, if you would please be so kind to kind of move up towards the front. This way the congressman can actually see people in the audience.
He can't see anybody.
Oh, he's not going to be able to see. Okay, all right, well, never mind. If you'd like to get a better vantage point, then please feel free to go ahead and move on up. Now, what's going to be happening here through lunch, ladies and gentlemen, is obviously the congressman will be on at 11:30. We will then go into lunch at noon. At 12:10, while we are eating, we're going to hear from Maria Acosta.
Can you bring him up?
And then right at 12:30, the veterans and patriots in this room are going to get a little bit of entertainment. And here's how it's going to work, folks. When you hear your Armed Forces theme song, please stand up and be counted. That's going to be part of the entertainment here, so can't wait for that. Anyway, while we are waiting until that 11:30 time, just a little bit of background on the congressman. Congressman Louie Gohmert, serving his 5th term in the United States House of Representatives, was first sworn in on January 4, 2005. He proudly represents the 1st District of Texas, which encompasses over 12 counties, stretching nearly 120 miles down the state's eastern border. Now, during these trying economic times, Representative Gohmert is developing an innovative solutions to jumpstart the economy, offering practical alternatives to the government's bailout frenzy. His federal income tax holiday gained widespread national support for the grassroots level to national leaders, allowing taxpayers to decide how best to spend their hard-earned money. Louie has repeatedly called for an end to socialization of our economy and decried the notion that Washington bureaucrats know better than the American taxpayer. Isn't it interesting that we in this room know and consider Independence Day to be July 4th? But on the flip side of that political ideology, they consider Independence Day April 15th. So, as we are waiting patiently, please pay attention to the screen here, and the Congressman will be on shortly.
Okay, you can hear me. Great. This is Louie Gohmert. I'm in Washington in my office right here at the Capitol, and I so wish I could be with you guys right there in Spokane. I was so flattered to be asked. I couldn't believe you wanted somebody like me. I mean, I'm asked to speak some places where I figured they just wanted, by comparison, to have the normal speaker look better, so you invite me in. But glad to be speaking with you, and look forward to taking your questions. I was asked to give a little background on what's going on right now. Well, there's a great deal going on, but unfortunately, most of it is this administration spending money to have park rangers go out and close things that don't get a dime of federal money, but because of perhaps the land it's sitting on, one thing or another, they've intentionally gone out and tried to make life as difficult as they can. In fact, one of the articles here in Washington had quoted a park ranger as saying that the ranger was so disgusted because they had been ordered to make life as difficult as they can for the people around. So they have gone out to a nearly 300-year-old farm out near Mount Vernon, the Moore Farm. It has not taken a dime of federal funding since 1980. The director of the Moore Farm, where so many people go because unlike Mount Vernon, you can actually have events there and have outings there. It's really just a 300-year-old farm. Well, since the director's been there for 32 years, she said they have had some years when they barely get by, but enough groups come pay to use their place and all that they have gotten by and hadn't had to close the farm. But last Tuesday, the Park Service sent police out, park police, to run off the McLean Chamber of Commerce from McLean, Virginia. And they had paid. They were going to use the facility. They wouldn't let them have their meeting there. They had to move to another location, which meant lost revenue for the farm. The director, who used to work for the National Park Service, said that she wasn't sure they would survive this. They've lost $20,000 this week because the federal administration is being so mean-spirited, closing things. We've gotten reports from people who've been driving around Virginia, some very beautiful overlook areas. They've actually spent money to take barricades out and barricade off parking places, not where there's a restroom they might have to maintain, but just parking places where people could park and take pictures. They really are trying to make things as miserable as possible. We've gotten reports, one family from Texas had been saving money so they could send the patriarch of the family who fought at Normandy, had friends buried at the Normandy cemetery. It was their life trip. He'd never been back since World War II. He's over there now, and this administration will not allow any local group or private group or charitable group to open the cemetery. They have it closed down and will not let anybody in. It really is true. They're trying to make everything as rough as possible because polls had indicated before the shutdown, as they have for the last 3 years, that if there is a shutdown, Republicans will be blamed, and it increases the chance that Democrats will win back the majority in the House of Representatives. Now, let me take you back, if you'll allow me, since I was told I may not can hear you. It makes it tough for you to say, shut up, we don't want to hear any more of that. But I want to take you back to early January 2011. Republicans had won the majority back, and we were approaching the need for a continuing resolution, something to keep the government funded. That was coming up in March. We had heard from some military members who were in Afghanistan and Iraq saying, look, they're saying if there's a shutdown, my family may not get my check. We may lose our home. We could lose our car. Please, for heaven's sake, do not let our checks, our military checks, lapse. So I brought that up in our Republican conference with other House members and the Speaker and implored the Speaker, let us bring a bill to the floor of the House, get it passed that funds the military. So we would treat the military like we do Social Security recipients, and that is that they would get their check even if there's a shutdown. And by the way, if you hear people around Spokane, other areas say, oh gosh, the president has said Social Security recipients may stop getting their checks during the shutdown, please assure them that whoever said that is being a fearmonger, because their check is not going to stop. If the shutdown goes on for maybe 2 years, we may run into a problem. But otherwise, Social Security recipients will get their check. During the time of a shutdown, if their check is supposed to increase, it won't increase during that time, but they will get their Social Security check during a shutdown. That's not in jeopardy. But we wanted to make sure the military was the same way. And so I was pushing that bill. I had over 200 co-sponsors, and I could not get the Speaker to bring it to the floor. And then we got to the night when the government was going to shut down at midnight, and the Speaker had some people that stood up in tears and said, all of you Republican friends of mine, if you're a real friend, you'll vote for this bad CR tonight because my military friends won't get paid. I got a military installation. They're going to suffer. You got to vote for this CR. When they knew that this was not a continuing resolution that was going to be supported by most Republicans, but they knew if they made a real sob story and said the military's not going to get paid if you don't agree to vote for this continuing resolution. And again, this is in March of 2011. And we started this discussion February of 2011, March, spilled into April. But we got a bunch of Republicans to pass a CR that we wouldn't have voted for other than the military being left out in the cold. So ever since then, I have continued to push to get the military paid in the event of a shutdown, because it seemed to me that the Republican way to do this would be, let's get all the Republicans and Democrats to agree on funding all those things we can agree on, and then we can fight over only the things that we don't agree on. Well, 2.5 years later, the Speaker finally listened, and we got a bill passed through the House that would make sure the military was funded, and it included funding for all civilian contractors, all civilian employees that supported the military and that were helpful in them accomplishing their mission. And son of a gun, just like I figured they would, the Senate took it up and passed it last Monday, and then the President signed it, even though they had said they weren't going to do that. Well, now that means we're in a position to say, all right, you did that one. Here's another bill we think we can agree on that you're heavy and strong on. We'll do it for you. Normally, the National Institute of Health, that does some fantastic research, is not one of the first things funded. But we knew that was a very important issue to Democrats, and we said, here, we'll fund the NIH. We'll fund the FDA. You guys have been complaining about that. We'll agree on that. We can agree. Here it is. The Senate lets it sit there. They won't pass it. Even before then, a lot of us wanted to make sure our wounded warriors were taken care of. And so we passed a bill to make sure the VA, our wounded warriors, all of those things were taken care of. Well, the majority leader of the Senate, Harry Reid, decided this was not something he was going to be doing. So he refused to fund our veterans, refused to fund the NIH. And if you haven't seen it, you should get somebody or find yourself online where Harry Reid was asked a question. It was a softball question by CNN reporter Dana Bash, and asking about, what about children? If a child is dying of cancer, wouldn't you want that money to be spent to help that one child? And he rambled around for a while, but she said, but if you could save one child of cancer, wouldn't you want to do that? And he responded, his words were, why would I do that? Why would we do that? To some people, this really is a game. And that became clear yesterday, in the last 2 days, when some White House official told a reporter here that they're not interested in ending the shutdown because, quote, we are winning, unquote. Well, if they think that they are winning, obviously they want the shutdown to continue. You probably have heard about the World War II Memorial. Folks, they have spent so much money closing up open-air memorials. It's disgusting what they've done there. So Steve Palazzo of Mississippi, a Republican congressman from there, had sent an email out to a bunch of us who said, look, my veterans are coming in on one of the honor flights, and they're told that they put up barricades. They're not going to be allowed to ride in their wheelchairs down the granite sidewalks into the World War II Memorial. And it's just a sidewalk that goes by these granite pillars and marble. And so a bunch of us headed over there. And I'd been told they even interwove the yellow tape through the barricades. So the last thing I did was grab my scissors off my desk before we headed over there. And I thought, you know what? We had all these veterans there from World War II in wheelchairs. And there were a number of members of Congress, and there were lots of cameras and people doing press statements on camera about how bad this was, how ridiculous it was. And I went around and talked to some of the people and then made my way over to two particular barricades that were blocking the main ramp down into the World War II Memorial. And then it dawned on me, I'm sorry, I'm a lawyer, we better make sure the park rangers know who we are, that we're members of Congress and we're allowed access on the committee that has jurisdiction over the parks. And so I asked Steve King from Iowa if he would go over and show his identification card to the park ranger there so that she would know and they would know we're members of Congress, we're legit. And they couldn't complain. They had no idea who we were. I see Steve do that. I yelled for Steve Palazzo, hey, Steve, come on over here to the barricades. So he finished his interview, came over, and I said, when I grab this barricade, you grab that one. I've not admitted publicly who took my scissors and clipped the tape, but the tape was clipped. And we moved the barricades back, and here came the bagpipe, the wheelchairs, and the World War II Memorial was open. And so we're seeing that kind of thing all over the place, and there are more people doing that. And the Vietnam Memorial, they've got barricades and people are ignoring them. I'm going to go down to the Lincoln Memorial and see if we can't this afternoon get some people to just ignore the barriers and go enjoy that open air memorial as well. They've done it to the Martin Luther King Memorial. You can't help but wonder if people might feel a bit like they did in some of the saddest times in our country when people were not of color were not allowed into the places they wanted to go. It's time to move those barriers as well. But y'all had sent me a question or two. Let's see. The first question on immigration. Great question. Is there enough money to secure the border with whatever means it takes? Yes, there is. Yes, there is. There absolutely is. And not only is there enough money to secure the border as it is, and by the way, we've also passed a bill to fund Homeland Security, but there is money for that. I was on a show, I guess in August, with George Stephanopoulos on a Sunday morning, and the Democratic friend, Joaquin Castro, had said, hey, the border is more secure than it's ever been. Now, folks, I'm not a fan of the Woodrow Wilson presidency, but as I mentioned to him, under Woodrow Wilson's presidency, Pancho Villa and some of his gangs had come across and killed a bunch of American families, and that's when Woodrow Wilson said, that's it. Nobody is coming in. We don't want to come in. You can find accounts of somewhere between 50 to 150,000 troops were put on the border, National Guard mainly. He sent General Pershing chasing after Pancho Villa and his people into Mexico. And folks, the border was secure. It was completely secure. Nobody came in. We didn't want to come in. Right now, the only reason the border is not totally secured is because the administration does not have the will to do it. Now, I catch some flack from some Republicans because I call it like I see it. But constantly behind the scenes and in front of the scenes, some of us were very critical of the Bush administration because we did not believe, well, the fact is, he was not securing the border as well as it could have been secured under his watch. I don't care what party it is. If your job is to secure the border, secure it. And they can do that. And the other thing we've made clear to the administration, if you run out of money, let us know. We will immediately appropriate more money to get it secured, but we're not just going to give you blank checks because we've seen what you do. You send them to Solyndra. You send them to enemies in Syria. You send them to the wrong people. You show us what it's for, we'll appropriate it for that. There's another question. Who is responsible for getting just answers for Benghazi? I am so glad you guys care about that. Everyone should care about that. And in response to Hillary Clinton, what difference does it make? What difference it makes is that other people in other embassies and consulates will not have to die. During the Clinton years, there were 2 embassies that were attacked with bombs and people were killed. We never totally got to the bottom of exactly what our weaknesses were, how we could have improved them. And if they are not willing to get this improved and get to the bottom of it, then we're going to continue to lose people at embassies. So as far as who is responsible, Speaker Boehner had originally allowed only the Intelligence Committee to investigate. Some of us raised Cain about that because the Intelligence Committee would end up having a classified report. So much of the results would be kept private, and we wouldn't get to the bottom, and the public wouldn't know. And everybody should have a chance to know, especially the family members. Some of the family members of those who have passed away have become friends, and we're trying to do all we can to help them. In fact, Ty Woods widow and his mother-in-law brought food to my office earlier this week just to say thank you for the help that we've been trying to provide them. These are good people. These are patriotic people. But our two former Navy SEALs who were killed, who the administration released their names and first said they died seeking cover. They weren't seeking cover. These were Navy SEALs, former Navy SEALs, but they don't die seeking cover. They may die seeking a better platform from which to attack, but they don't die seeking cover. And I knew that when I heard that. And sure enough, they were providing cover to dozens of other people, and that's when they died. I may still be the only member of Congress that has talked and become friends with a survivor of Benghazi. He was on the roof with Ty Woods and Glenn Doherty, named David Ubben. I had not spoken the name for months because I'd told him that until he was ready to talk, I would not out him. But after his name became public, he said, it's okay. But David was on the roof there with Ty and Glenn. And I was in the Army, and those of you in the audience that have been in the service, you know, you're taught that if you're in the artillery or if you're firing mortars, then if you have 3 rounds, if you fire 3 rounds, then no matter where your target is within the triangle of those 3 rounds, the 4th round, with a little calculation, should always be dead on your target. And so if you're in the infantry, and I was trained in the infantry, if you're in the infantry, you're taught if there are 3 rounds that explode around you, get out of there because the 4th one will be right on top of you. So when I was talking to David, initially he said, man, they fired 3 mortar rounds. And I said, oh, they bracketed you. And he said, no. They knew exactly where we were. They missed with the first one, but it was obvious even with the first one. They were zeroed in. They knew exactly where we were. And as a result, the next 2 rounds killed Ty, Glenn, and took much of David's leg off. We owe all of these people an obligation to get to the bottom. I was talking to a former deep cover intel officer, no longer with the intelligence now. He was with Africa. And he assures me there were 60 special forces individuals who were in Tripoli, were ready to go. They had the weapons to stop any attack, and they were prevented from leaving. We've also been told that there have been people who've been ordered to lie and to say nothing. We owe everyone who has died. Their blood screams out for the truth. After enough of us complained, the Speaker finally allowed Darrell Issa's committee to start investigating. I want a select committee. I want subpoenas. I want to go to court if they don't answer the subpoenas. I want people brought before the committee till we get to the answers. Now, that's different from the IRS scandal. We know it's not a phony scandal, as the president originally said. It was a real scandal. But we have got to get to the bottom, and I think because there are laws that specifically make it a crime for IRS agents or IRS officials to use their positions for anything that's inappropriate motivation, I think we need a special prosecutor for that. Now, we'll have to create a new position to do that, but it's clear Eric Holder will never allow anybody in this administration to be prosecuted, just as he has obfuscated on the issue of Fast and Furious. So I was asked if my speaker was on. Every now and then I would hear something, but I don't hear anything now. But if you have any other... Hey there, I hear you. Wow. Well, thank you. It's great to hear you've got such a good crowd. That's our kind of people then. That's great. Well, what other questions you have? great question. You got a number of questions built in, but the whole question tells me that you've got a bunch of folks there who know what's going on to ask a question that good. So as far as the different factions, that was the first thing you asked. I don't know that I would describe them as factions, but you have people from different districts. Dave Reichert was sheriff there. He is not a liberal by nature, but he has to represent the people that elected him, and that is a very tough race each time he runs. Dave has mentioned that he has had maybe over 400 that have been really nasty, cussing, terrible calls. There are other people who are from districts that could go either way, Republican or Democrat. And they're hearing from a lot of Democrats saying, go ahead and cave, give Obama whatever he wants, this kind of thing. And so they're under a lot of pressure. But with all those different types of areas in the country that we have, people have really been about as united as I've seen them. I mean, there have been some who were upset. There's been maybe 8. I know it was reported 18 or 19, but maybe 8 who have said they'd vote for what some people call a clean CR. I do not think that is an appropriate term. There's no such thing as a clean continuing resolution, because any resolution that continues to spend money exactly as it was spent the year before has agreed to all the continuing waste, fraud, and abuse that was there the year before. Everybody knows there's waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal appropriations. And we see it constantly. You know, at most every week there is a new revelation of some wasted money that was spent. So the Constitution requires that Congress appropriates. The Constitution gives Congress the power of the purse. So when people say, well, we're only 1/2 of 1/3 of the government, no. We are the most important half of the government that is in charge of appropriating money. That's why that was the biggest oversight that was provided in the Constitution. They wanted to make so sure that we could never have an executive who could become so powerful that it would resemble a monarchy. They even had huge debates over the type of terms that they could be used. Most of them didn't want the term Your Excellency or things like that because they had fought so hard against a monarchy. So Congress has the powers of the purse. So let me just tell you, any president or anyone with a president who says that Congress just needs to give us all the money we're demanding, no questions asked, just a continuing resolution to allow us to keep spending money. Figuratively speaking, we're giving them sacks of money for them to dole out any way they want with a continuing resolution. So there's no such thing as a clean CR. It's full of pork, lard, all kinds of waste. So I hope we don't roll over and do that. Right now, here we are Saturday, and we passed a bill that many of us in the Republican Party would not have wanted to be in the first week of appropriations bills, but it was to fund all federal workers, including back pay. The reason that was done, yes, you know, we want to take care of the veterans. We brought that to the floor immediately, and the Democrats did not support that, and they brought it down the first time. We have funded so many aspects of the government this week that the Senate has refused to take up. But because SEIU and these government unions are putting so much pressure on the Democrats to make sure they get funded, we thought, okay, well, we will fund the federal workers. So we passed that bill just in the last 2 or 3 hours, and now it's up to the Democrats in the Senate. They've been saying all week, we got to make sure the federal employees get to work, how mean-spirited of the Republicans not to allow that. Okay, well, we brought these other bills to the floor and passed them, and now we've passed one for your federal workers. So this is a strategy, and there was a meeting at Heritage yesterday where they were saying if it had not been for getting that military pay bill before the shutdown, getting that through and signed into law, we would be in a terrible situation. But since we did, we know that they can go ahead and take up individual bills. So the strategy's holding right now. Let's keep sending them bills to fund all the things in the government that we can agree on, even some things like today where we think some of those federal workers should be cut. I'm a fan of cutting the EPA. They've been draconian the way they've hurt the cost of electricity. In fact, I came with Kathy McMorris Rogers, hers and my freshman term, and we came to Spokane. Spokane. I love the place. I had no idea it was so beautiful there. And we went to some folks' houses and we had some events, and I just fell in love with the place. So I was really looking forward to being back there. But one of the things we did while we were in Washington State, we had field hearings on what the EPA was doing and what the endangered species was doing to Washington State. We had one power company testify that they were required to spend $8 million to save what amounted to 20 salmon. And I brought up in our hearing, you know what, for $8 million, you could hatch a lot of salmon so you could avoid the problems you're creating. Well, one of the people there got upset and said I had no idea what I was talking about, that salmon that were hatched in fisheries, even though immediately released into the wild, they could never be the same as fish that were hatched in the wild. We now have reports that indicate just the opposite. We also got a report, there was a river, I forget which one, where the endangered species caused the spending of millions of dollars so that salmon, for ladders that would allow the salmon to get back to their original spawning places. And as a result, because man interfered and built ladders so the salmon could get there, even though they were going to get there themselves, it allowed sea lions to get there. And there were some pictures of sea lions, they were so fat they could hardly move, rolling over and bite out of one salmon, roll over and bite out of another salmon. When we interfere, we do a lot of damage. And so, anyway, those are things that we should be cutting back that's doing damage to America. We want clean water. We want clean air. It is getting cleaner. You've now heard, I'm sure, 15 years, and the earth is not warming. I remember when I graduated from college, we were told we were at the beginning, maybe 1,000 or so years, but we were at the beginning of a new ice age. Well, there is a cycle to the weather, and we don't need to spend any more billions to keep doing that. Okay, there are several Texans here today who want to encourage you to run for the U.S. Senate. You folks are too nice. Thank you very much. But I'm praying about it. I've never made a move without both my wife and I having a peace that this is what we're supposed to do. Back when I said, well, I felt like it was a calling to leave the bench as a judge and chief justice and run for Congress in order to legislate, I've had reporters say, Louie, did you hear voices? And I know where they're going with that. And the truth is, I've never heard voices that others didn't hear. I would love to hear voices. When I was in the Army at Fort Benning, there was a young man who heard Ms. Lee tell him stuff to do all the time, and that was great when Ms. Lee was telling him to be a good soldier, but one day she told him to kill 2 MPs, and that created problems. I've never heard Ms. Lee. I've never heard any voices. So I pray, I seek wise counsel. I appreciate Glenn Beck's wise counsel. We've talked on the air and off the air. There are a lot of other people that have encouraged. It's 5 months till our primary, and I've also seen some people get to thinking so highly of themselves that they got overly ambitious and abandoned the place where I believe God had allowed them and facilitated them being to do good. So on the one hand, I don't want to ever get too arrogant, too haughty, thinking too much of myself, that I expand, go beyond the reach. And that's certainly not because I lack courage. I'm not afraid of anybody or anything. Fear God. That's the beginning of wisdom. But in fact, one day Mike Pence, before he went back and became governor, had said one day on the floor, "Louie, you're amazing. You don't fear God nor man." I said, "Mike, you know I fear God." He said, "It's an expression, you know." But sometimes, I hope you understand what I mean, sometimes your strongest attribute can be a weakness. Like if you're like me and maybe you are fearless of anything. Obviously, if you go online, you understand I'm not afraid of being called a moron, an idiot. Never mind, I was in the top 5% nationally on national test scores, but they'll call me a moron. I've seen. I love it when they say I'm a moron and they misspell moron. Or one guy said I was the dumbest guy in Congress, and he misspelled dumbest. But I saw more recently somebody spelled dumbest correctly. But sometimes our strength can be our weakness. People know I'm not afraid of even taking on Republican leaders if I think they're wrong. And so everybody wants you to immediately get in their fight this fight, fight that fight. So if you believe in the power of prayer, I need prayers for wisdom. I need to know when to fight, when not to fight, where to fight, what to fight over. I just want to do the best I can to help this country. All of us, we were born in this country or came into this country because of the work of other people opening those opportunities for us. And I really do not want our children to be the first generation that doesn't get to live as well as we have and have the freedoms and the opportunities. Although I did hear a female comedian, obviously in her 20s, was talking and said, "Have you heard that we're supposed to be the first generation that doesn't live as well as our parents? Isn't that ridiculous? How could we not live as well as our parents when we're all still living with our parents?" So I don't know, but I just want to do all I can, and I appreciate the encouragement. You've kept me on a lot longer than I understood you meant to. I'm glad to take another question if you would like, and appreciate the chance to talk to you. I hope you're not too angry with me for not being there, but this is where the fight is this week. And it was great to open the World War II Memorial, and we're going to go see if we can't do that some other places this afternoon after I leave you. Any other questions?
I think we're good.
All right. John, Diane, group, thank you so much for letting me share this time with you. Thank you. God bless you. I know it's tough in Washington. Of course, you're in an area of Washington where you got a lot more people who are thinking properly. But let's be kind and gentle to our less fortunate, our mentally disabled friends on other more liberal parts of Washington. but I'm hearing you. You're making a difference. Thank you. God bless you.